And Loki for talking landscape photography. As
Been
you're
a
probably
lot.
aware, we've had a bit of a breather on and off for the last 6 months. We've got a couple back in, and quite amazingly, Luke and I sat down the other day, and as has always been the case, even after 4.5 years, we've got so many ideas and so many people we can talk to. It's just quite amazing. So we're lining up a wonderfully talented, very well-known international photographer from Europe at the moment, which will hopefully come together pretty soon, and reconnecting with a few guests we've had on the show before, and coming up with some new ideas again. But this show is kind of dedicated to Lukey and I, actually. We're often take a back seat and let the other guests have a play, which is fine and what we love doing. But occasionally it's nice to shine the spotlight back the other way. And as we've done in other years, we've often started the year's first live show with a sort of exploration of our summer adventures, as it were. So my set, for instance, is quite varied and quite diverse, and it might give you a bit more of an insight into the wider scope of what I do and sort of how I like to live my life a little bit. Um, and Lukey's as well. We're also going to introduce a couple of new segments that we're going to try and do consistently on the shows, and mine's going to be critique of the week, which is either an image or a new photographer where I'm really quite moved and astonished by, or feel like there's a lot of educational opportunity to look into. Um, and I've chosen a German photographer this week. And Lukey's going to come up with a new section. Do you want to speak about that, Luke?
Yeah, so my section's called Sharky's Toolkit, and for I'm sure it doesn't need any introduction or anything that I'm a bit of a gear nerd or I love different tools and planning and understanding things and making the most of the information that's around us. And so each episode I'll bring a new piece of kit that you probably haven't heard of, but is pretty amazing, and you might make a big difference in your photography, or at least give you another maybe app or accessory or something that is actually really useful for your photography. And so I figured that with all the stuff that I try and spend my money on and test, I can give you my learnings and some of the best equipment and tools that are going around.
Yeah. Do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
Oh, why don't we head off with the critique of the week? I'm pretty keen to see this new photographer and I guess hear more about why they it's really caught your eye.
Alrighty. Yeah, so just so you know, it's 30 degrees here where I am, and I think it's close to 35 where Lukey is. So if you see us
Yeah,
drinking
I've got
water
a
or,
I
or
mean
sweating
my
profusely.
studio's not air conditioned, so it's a little bit uncomfortable for even by Tasmanian standards, it's pretty warm at the moment. So
So
waiting for
yeah,
that cool change. It's still a little ways off.
I'm just going to imagine I'm standing in this view behind me here, getting a cold winter spray all over me to cool down because I don't have an aircon either. But at the same time, I don't necessarily need it. I'd say 99.9% of the time. But even hotter tomorrow. But I'm just going to double check if I'm. You just need to let me share screen, Lucky, or maybe a
Oh,
code.
yep, we can do all of that. It's a little bit rusty these days because it's been a while since we've done a live episode. It's
Ah,
been
like
ages.
riding, like
So
riding a bike, mate.
um,
Riding a bike.
yeah, no, that's right. But no, it is very good to be back, and yeah, definitely keen to get stuck into some pretty amazing episodes across this year.
So is that working, Lucky? You seeing my screen?
It is working. Just don't dismiss that window so we can see the rest of your messages, of course. But that'll be good.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I was chatting to a good friend of mine, Caroline Chang, just this week actually, and it's not that often that I personally sort of go looking around or come across photographers. I tend to sort of do my own thing, and I really enjoy the judging process and that kind of thing. And I've met a lot of photographers and seen a lot of interesting work that way. But sometimes I just live my own world, and it's quite nice occasionally to open my mind up. And I discovered a photographer called Tom Hegan, who's a German photographer, and it was actually Caroline that put me onto him. She'd been researching places in Spain, I believe, to go photograph and a few others. And if anyone's heard of Ed Batinsky before, he's probably the most preeminent photographer in the world doing aerial photography based on exploring man's impact and the interaction of man and nature in general and a broader sense as well. And Tom has taken his career path along a very similar kind of reign, and that both of them are also use very high-end, high-resolution camera systems and do a lot of deep research, sometimes a couple of years between the idea and the actual shoot. And what struck me about Tom's is first this image was the first image that really struck me. It's kind of otherworldly. It's strangely dimensional. It's shot in unusual kind of light. It's very figurative and symbolic and emotive and kind of meandering and yet there's a lot of underlying conversation about man shaping the landscape and it's from an area in Spain, this one, and I really like the sort of understated yet rich hues. It's not monochromatic, but it's sort of using a slightly minimalist sort of element or hues of just the one color, and you could argue for most of it, and yet very, very successfully they give it a lot of space and depth and movement and power and dimensionality. And I'm not sure if it's kind of dappled light, but it sort of feels like it could be, which is actually one of my favorite lights to shoot in. But what I also really admire about Tom, I'm really just discovering right now, to be perfectly honest, is he really launches into large bodies of work. He's exhibited all around the world in various places. There's a picture of Tom there. He's not afraid to go down the deep end in terms of really getting deep into the more visceral aspects of man's impact, but he also has an incredibly beautiful artistic eye. There's quite a lot of modern exploration of solar energy as well. I actually just listened to a TED talk of his where he speaks a lot about the kind of man's impact and element and role of photography in that. This is a very interesting, intriguing one here of a night scene of some power cells. He actually did a whole series on remote sort of markets that was very, very difficult to shoot, and he was using 100 megapixel drone setups to get the kind of detail he wanted, just to shoot these markets. He also very cleverly did an incredible series in a book, I believe, on airports, which he was smart enough to do during COVID, which of course is probably the preeminent time in the history of the modern world to be able to take on a project like that. So often his posts are series orientated rather than just single. So you could get more of a sense of the breadth and the thought process and the level of kind of research and permissions that he's got to pull off a lot of his projects, which I personally find very, very impressive. So I just started looking through his work. I particularly get caught by the some of the new kind of lithium works he's done as well, which I find quite evocative. It's one of those modern conversations now too, where as much as we're moving away from and searching for more comprehensively sustainable kind of sources of energy, we're going to be leaning a lot harder into lithium and cobalt and other sort of minerals as a resource for the world, and in terms of the battery powered, electric powered kind of elements that we're doing things with. So he has a great website as well. This is just his Instagram page, but is quite prolific and very well placed out kind of web page as well. So I highly, I mean, it's right up my alley, of course, and very close to home for me in terms of the style and genre sort of work. That's some of the lithium sort of work right there, actually, that you just saw, super colourful. But yeah, I'm always, me, my greatest. If I could argue that there is a single greatest passion of mine in landscape photography, it is aerial work, and to see people doing it masterfully and meaningfully with purpose is right up my alley and gets my soul singing. So
Maybe a
that'll
potential
be
guest down the
my
track.
yeah. I'm definitely going to reach out to him and just see how it goes. He's pretty high end, so hopefully he'll be open. I think is from what I listened to the TED Talk, his English is good enough. I actually just reached out to another photographer with this incredible new body work from Kyrgyzstan, and I was just like, oh my God, please come on the show. And he said, basically, I don't really speak English, so we haven't quite figured out a way around that. But where there's a will, there's a way. So stay tuned on that one.
Well, there you go. No, that's an incredible body of work, and it's great to hear what kind of things that you look out for in photography that really speak to you, and it sounds like it's also quite appealing to you the project-based nature of his work as well, and some of the extra lengths he's gone to with his to create these bodies of work rather than just shooting around the place and doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not a spray and pray approach. It's very deeply researched and deeply considered, and you can see through the evolution of his bodies of work how he's moving into more meaningful spheres or impactful spheres for a messaging to the world as a whole. And that's very dear to my heart, and I have great admiration for people that are, like he actually said in his TED Talk interview, the worst possible platform for doing photography is from the air. It's because it's just so crazy how things move around and the vibrations and the spinning rotors you got to get out of the way and the permissions and how cold it can be and I never really looked at it that way myself, but he's probably right, arguably. So that was quite entertaining to hear it that way. But yeah, I'm just actually yeah, Luke and I both been busy looking at some of our workshops coming up, and I actually was just putting the touches on a custom aerial one in WA. So it's got me thinking a little bit more meaningfully about sort of using that approach with the clients and maybe nudging them into a sort of project-based approach to get a more meaningful body of work out of the trip.
That sounds, yeah, like a really great thing to learn, even just on a workshop base as well. Yeah, amazing. Good stuff, Paul. Well, it's time now for Sharky's Toolkit. And tonight, I'm going to talk about an app, well, it is an app, and it's also a web app as well, I suppose. So it's a website that you can visit, and it's also an app you can download. It's called bushfire.io, and it's quite topical for us here in Tasmania at the moment because
Sure is.
unfortunately we've got some really horrible bushfires. We're kind of blissfully ignorant in a way over in Hobart because over where we are over here, there's not quite so much fire activity going on. But you can see this big mark here on the west coast, which I think would be indicating an area of high fire danger. And you can see on this bushfire.io map all of the hot spots that are going around. And there's quite a few different layers here and a lot to look at. So I'm just going to have maybe turn some of these layers off and just show you what's available. One of the probably the kicker features of this is that it actually has aircraft. And so you can actually see the aircraft that are actively trying to put out the fires. So I don't know. Oh, we've got one over here, so you can actually click on it. You can see that one's headed out or on its way out to Cradle area and so forth. So there's not actually as many operating around this particular fire. This is the fire that actually went over the overland track. You can actually see the overland track in this picture here going past like Windermere, and the grey area is the burnt area. So it may have actually burnt some of the track infrastructure, and so at the moment the overland tracks are closed until the 23rd of February, which doesn't happen very often, that's for sure. I think all of
No.
the huts are safe and that kind of thing. But that you can actually see where all of the active parts of the fire actually are, where you're getting these hot spots showing up on the map. So if we move over, and I'll just try and remove that, I think it would be probably the weather warnings. Yeah, that's the background was the weather warnings, and you can also see the wind direction, which is very relevant to fire. So
Sure.
you might see how all of the fire seems to be on the western side of these burnt patches, and that's because that's the prevailing the easterly or southeasterly wind direction is actually forcing that the fire onto the western side of those fire areas. Unfortunately, that means that it's actually pushing the fire. There's a fire here in the Tarkine. It's actually pushing that fire right onto the Tarkine coast, and the burnt areas now unfortunately go all the way down to one of our favourite locations called Rupert Point. And so
Oh man, almost in tears when I've been looking at this, Loki.
yeah,
Um,
so it looks like that entire area has been completely burnt, pretty much all the way down to the ocean there, Interview River as well. I was planning to do a hike along there and photograph the pig face and a few other things, and that area is going to be devastated now for a few years. It's not the particularly sort of area where there's paleoendemic species that mightn't actually most of the vegetation there can recover is what I'm trying to say. But there may be some impacted Huon pines in this particular fire, including the world's oldest Huon pine, and also in this area some Fagus and pencil pines maybe damaged. That wasn't me choking up, but it is at that level if you are into botanical things. Um, so basically, that I've been probably talking more about the fires than the app, but you can see the value in having something like this. You can also set notification areas as well, so that will actually be able to give you real-time updates and things for an area of interest. And you can also
Luke
change.
actually helped me set it up for the area around my home, so I could get some warnings ahead of time as well. Because I live on the slopes of Mount Wellington, which basically this entire side of Mount Wellington was destroyed in 1967, along with quite a few lives and hundreds of homes. So it's sort of I'm a bit of a fire corridor where I am, and quite interesting, Lukey. That beautiful area all the way up to Winter Creeper Sandy Cave. I'm actually working on an exhibition right
Mm,
now from that area where that Luke and I have spent a significant amount of time and done
yeah,
some
probably
cool work.
right and about
It
here, which is yeah
reminds
completely
me of
burnt
that
out.
that kind of
So
role of photography, almost as with climate change sort of breathing down our neck. That sometimes some of the work that we've created all these years is going to be arguably the last documented pristine sort of wilderness in modern time with events
yeah,
like.
well, we have those aerial photos from there with all of the every vegetation intact and all of that, and it's going to look very different than that for many years now. So.
Yeah.
So it's very sad, and you can definitely see the active areas of the fire. It's moving north towards Arthur River and some of the other areas, but it's almost completely decimating. And that's a huge tract of area. Like if you were to walk from this area downwards, that'd take you several days to walk along the coast. So it's a massive area that's been impacted. And so yeah, having a tool like this can keep the horror show front of mind for you if you're into that, but also obviously a planning tool if you're going to go out and do any hikes or anything like that, you can have a better idea of what's going on around the
Lucky from
place.
a colours point of view, the really the grey areas on the ground are areas that are currently been burnt out, and the lighter dots are the relative levels of danger or amount of the intensity of the fires that are happening on the ground. Is that right?
That's right. So and I think there is a key if you when you click on it, it will say how long ago that hotspot has actually been logged and the resolution. So it's a 2 kilometer resolution. So that indicates in that 2K radius that there's been a hotspot identified essentially. But the grey area behind shows the areas that have been burned, but that's mapped out by, I believe, aerial surveillance after the fact. So you'll see say for in here, you can see that there's no grey here, but when this gets updated, that will go grey in the sense that these hotspots are telling you in advance of what actually will be turning grey in the future. So as in burnt out areas. And so if you go to a site like Tas Alert or something like that, that will give you these grey patches as well. You don't actually get the hotspots over top to see what's actually happening, and you don't get any visibility of like the aircraft. And you can see this aircraft here's been it's a Firebird. I don't know if that means it's a helicopter, so whether that's been just surveying the fire or doing some water drops over the fire, trying to stop it from getting too close to getting very close here to some Fagus patches and to Barn Bluff and Lake Wilkes here, Lake Wills rather, which are but very yeah, incredible areas. And I'll have a be showing some photos taken literally just around here, so very close to Cradle Mountain. Unfortunately, the fire weather is continuing tomorrow, but there is some potential rain after that and a cool change coming in. So fingers crossed that the fire situation will abate after that. But it's just been running rampant throughout the whole Tarkine area here, and that's an incredibly large area of a land to have been burning. So everything I was showing you is on the free plan. You can also pay and get a few extra layers, but I did pay. I can tell you that for what you get extra, you get heaps on the non-paid plan. So I think it's just you get some real-time hotspots a bit more, but these are just pretty decent anyway. So yeah, I think I've probably spent enough time talking about this one. Did you have any other thoughts that I could mention about it, Paul?
I mean, it's a bit more personal, I guess, Lucky, because that's such a precious area to me, and I spent 25 years of my life exploring and photographing those areas, and it's brought up a lot of debate. And Rob Blake has been spearheading it, I believe. You probably know more about it than me, Lucky, in terms of how much resources are put in and what limited resources there are to kind of wildlife and natural resources such as, ancient human pine stands and things like that, as opposed to existing infrastructure that's man-made. And sort of hits the bottom line, and it's an ongoing debate that will continue in Tasmania, I believe. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Lukey.
Oh, it's yeah, we dodged a bullet for quite a few years. We had some horrible fires. I think it was in 2019, which had sort of year before the horrible fires in the mainland, and we lost a huge part of the state then. And yeah, unfortunately, we just happened to have a very hot day like today, and a dry lightning storm come through and started off a whole bunch. And it's a bit Russian roulette where these lightning bolts hit, and fortunately, it didn't hit, centuries old pencil pine forests that are like in the walls of Jerusalem, which I'll show some shots of, or it's any place can go. And I think from my perspective, what it really does show is the value or the importance of the work that we do in documenting these special, beautiful places. And so my personal goal or mission in life is to share the beauty of Tasmania and the rest of the world with people and help people understand how these places don't always stay this way, and we can do things to make sure that they stay the way that they are. I mean, change is inevitable, of course, but that we don't tend to gain more beautiful places. We only really tend to lose the beautiful places, and so it's really nice to be able to celebrate that, and hopefully through the photos that Paul and I share tonight as well, you'll sort of get an appreciation for how special these places are, and what drives us to get out there and do some crazy things to be able to show people that.
Yeah, the exhibition was part of a project that Lucky was on board for as well as my friend Andrew and an Aboriginal elder, Teresa Saini and the TLC leader Nala Mansell. So it's a very indigenous oriented. It's a very rich. Arguably the most culturally rich element coastal area in the whole of Australia, actually as well. So it's not just the sort of natural elements that are being destroyed here. It's actually some of the cultural, the hut depressions and tool sites and huge living areas that are down there that are still really intact. It's one of the more untouched areas in the whole of Tasmania from a cultural perspective, and so Luke and I have been part of a big project to do that. So it's sort of, yeah, it's quite telling. In fact, we're already thinking about how we can acknowledge that in the oncoming exhibition and be more mindful of the value and the resource that we've created already in this regard in terms of educating around that. I'm going to reach out to Rob this week too and see where he's at with it all. Rob Blakers is a neighbour of mine and actually my next door neighbour and landlord, funny enough, is actually one of the experts in environmental fire management and protection in the state as well and has been for decades. So very close to home. So very appropriate choice of app for Lucky tonight. Both
Yes,
for
that's all.
where we live and also for our role as landscape photographers, arguably.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, it's part and parcel of summers in Tasmania. You get with the summer adventure show, and yeah, that's definitely a factor in Tassie. And I've myself, when I was living in Sydney, had trips where I had to change my plans because of bushfires in certain areas. And yes, it's the luck of the draw. Like the environment has luck if it doesn't get hit or not by lightning or someone's bushfire, campfire, or not that you can do that anymore, but or arson or anything like that. So it's definitely front of mind this time of year, and yeah, that's a surprise. I'd never come across that app before. So hopefully that helps some of you with your own bushfire management or understanding as well. Paulie, did you probably take
Yeah,
it away with
just
your
I will in a sec. One more comment I want to make. I want to reach out to a friend of mine and a friend of the show is Roger Fishman. So Roger is an LA based photographer and he's shown us some incredible work from Greenland and places that few people have been. But he's one of those people that has lost his home and his life and his well-being in the LA fires and rather than being completely distraught about it, he's using currently his skill set and energy to document the fires from the air because he's an expert aerial photographer, and it's been quite amazing and sort of quite full on watching him at work each day, releasing new material to kind of document and raise awareness and also support for the wider community through the process of the imagery and the documentation and video that he's doing. So. big shout out to you, my friend, and all those other people that have been so deeply affected by the fires over there. And Lucky's right, we've dodged a bit of a bullet for a few years now in Tassie, and I guess it's sort of slowly sort of coming back to us. And tomorrow's going to be an interesting day too, being even hotter than today. Hopefully, there's a little bit of rain coming on the back end of that. Um, but a lot of the damage has already been done on the west. So
It's
yeah,
quite brutal, really, too, because I think there's here at home we could get up to 50 mils, but West Coast, which is normally traditionally very wet, is actually different, having under a different sort of stream or what have you, and so they're actually not getting as much rain as what we would be getting. So it's just a one of those things where the planets are aligned the wrong way.
Mm.
Yeah.
So moving into a more positive, positive space. Well, it's all important. I'm going to share some of my summer adventures. So, long and the short of it, I decided to go home. I left quite early, sort of mid-December, and my one of my sisters' family are basically all crazy, wild athletes and adventurers, and ever since 4 or 5 years old, I've been doing crazy adventures with the kids there, and now they're like 6'3", absolutely absolute monsters. They're on international sports scholarships around the world and doing all sorts of crazy things. So I was a bit nervous to go on some of these trips with them now because not as fit as they are anymore, and they're a lot stronger and more capable than I am. But yeah, so I started off in Queenstown and spent time in the South Island. Did some mountain biking with a dear friend. Went on a huge, incredible hike through Fiordland, which, if you hadn't been, is like nowhere else on Earth, and it just feels like you're going to some prehistoric dream of Jurassic Park in real life or something. It's been amazing. And I stretched myself to go on a good 60K hike over 3.5 days, carrying a bit of extra gear. I was carrying extra camera gear and tents and everything else. So it slowed me down a little bit. But I'll share screen and talk about it from a visual approach as well to make it a little more interesting with you all. Just checking that's coming up all right, Lukey.
Yeah, looking good, Paul. Looking good.
Good. So, if you've ever flown into Queenstown before, this is basically your view out the window of the plane when you land, quite literally. And that was literally what was greeting me when I arrived. And I got some dear friends down there. One of my oldest friends, arguably the oldest friend I have in the world, I've known since about two. And she's moved down there with her husband, who's a wild mountain biker. And I wouldn't say I'm a wild mountain biker, but I'm a passionate one. And I spent a lot of time, probably 25 years riding. And some of the best riding in the world is actually in Tasmania, but certainly New Zealand is even more famous for it, arguably, in the South Island in particular. And Queenstown and Wanaka are real hubs of that for in that part of the island. And there's all sorts of wild adventures you can go on down there and on helicopters and all sorts. But two of the ski fields there in the Coronet Peak and Cadrona have developed and shifted from a winter summer kind of vibe. So some of them have this and winter have the skiing, and some of them actually set up mountain biking parks. And they're quite different, but they're pretty spectacular. But yeah, the Remarkables they have a real matter to them. They're just present the whole time from just about every area you're out in Queenstown, and without fail, usually around sunset they light up really really beautifully. And so in this case, I sort of got that towards the sun and away from the sun facing. I got my friends to pull over, and when they realised I was frothing like a cat on acid, looking out the window of the car, they couldn't quite understand why. I went outside and showed them a few photos and showed them why. So. I hadn't been there since my workshop in April with Rachel Gillespie but I had a lot of the new spots fresh in mind to shoot, and I was a bit more mindful of where the good spots were. So yeah, light is light, and light is everything is in most photographs, arguably. So it was nice kind of knowing where to look and already been quite clear on what I wanted to create just in a short period of time. I shot a lot of these on a 100 to 400 mil lens actually, so they're a bit more compressed and kind of long. And I stayed just in front of the river. I think it's the Clutha River. This is we drove from Queenstown out to Wanaka to my friend's place, and they live just above the river here in this beautiful valley. Wanaka, I think, is it's one of the most stunning areas to live, I think, in New Zealand, and it's a lot more expensive to live than it used to be. But if you're just out of the way, a bit like they are, it's a bit more affordable. And They built a beautiful tiny house that they literally built themselves on a gorgeous property and made it really affordable and really beautiful. And their back view is this mountain range, and they literally watch that sunset almost every day. And it's quite a beautiful thing to do. I lucked into just absolute perfection of weather. They said it hadn't stopped raining for about a month before I got there, and every day I was there was like this. I was like, thanks very much. And
How do you keep doing that? Is there a secret, or is that
I
just
sort of don't want to say things, I don't want to jinx it, but I have to say that has happened to me a hell of a lot in my life. I don't know if it's because I smile a lot and try and bring a bit of sunshine along the world with me or something philosophical like that. But it certainly makes me smile when it happens, and I'm certainly incredibly grateful for it when it does. But I have to say, I've been extremely lucky with how consistent it's been in my life for as long as I can remember, to be honest. I'm touching a bit of wood here. So I was out in the middle of Lake Wanaka here. I think my friend on a joke said, "Why don't you paddle out in the middle of the lake?" And so I did. And I just laid back with my arms and stretched my feet out and just listened to the lapping of the water and just had the whole of the middle of the lake to myself until some wild water skiers got a bit too close and sprayed me. This is their little tiny house actually, and it's built gorgeously well. Wes is an international level downhill mountain biker. He got 13th in the World Downhill Masters, I think, in Brazil a few years ago. Very understated guy, but he's very skilled. Another view from the good old Mavic 3 Pro, which I took on the trip. I didn't end up using it much at all, but that was a shot I'd taken there before, and I knew it was there for the taking, so I thought I'd just popped up above the property, which you're allowed to do, obviously, on private property, and took a few shots with the long lens. Um, but then we got into the good stuff. Then this is Cadrona. So Cadrona is a beautiful ski field and a very family-friendly one. Also very focused on snowboarding in particular. It has all these different bowls on it, and they translate into huge jumps for mountain biking, funny enough, at the same time. But they've carved out about six different trails, and they're quite photogenic and beautiful to actually just photograph. And the mountain ranges around them are quite famous for the views, particularly I'd say the view at Treble Cone is the most beautiful single view I've had from a ski field in Australia or New Zealand of any field. It's quite famous for it. That's just coming up the road, and that's actually I think it's the road you actually travel up to the mountain or just across from it. So it's quite a feat. Wes, being the champion that he was, actually rode his bike up from the bottom of the mountain just to be able to give me the opportunity at the end of the day to do a vehicle shuffle, to ride the complete top to bottom of the mountain. I think it's called Peak to Pub. And I borrowed this beautiful Yeti bike, and Yeti makes some of the most beautifully handmade set of mountain bikes in the world off one of his neighbours, who I generously offered a bunch of IPAs and did some photography of his property for as a thank you. But it's quite beautiful, I literally was taking my big, 50 meg landscape camera with me, and I was using the bike to get out to different sort of areas to photograph kind of back valleys and different sort of places I probably wouldn't get to or would have less energy to get to on a bike, and so it's an interesting tool. And as Luke knows, I've invested at home in an electric mountain bike, and I can push that bike up to maybe 70, 80 kilometers on one charge, and I can get to places that I wouldn't otherwise sort of take the time or have the energy to get to really, really quite quickly. And as long as you don't sort of do any too many roly polies on your back from wiping out and crush your camera, it's actually quite a good way to get around. Um, Wes is the downhill master, so he's into full face helmets and goggles, is what most downhill riders kind of use. I wouldn't call myself a downhill rider at all, even though I kind of started off that way. But it's a beautiful way to explore country actually, and to take your time and get away from the crowds and search out different valleys and places and views I probably wouldn't otherwise get to. So I sort of made a point of that. And sometimes I just left Wes to do his crazy downhill runs because I was about three times lower than him. Even though he's a patient man, he was fine with it. I just thought I actually wanted to spend some time shooting, so I walked out backcountry and rode some of the way and hiked some of the way to get to some of the back areas. And even though I wasn't necessarily there at the perfect time of day for the light, it was still really beautiful to shoot. Um, and the trails themselves, just screaming of landscape. So it's actually nice to not go too fast and actually enjoy the place you're in, which is an element for all of us, even in bushwalking sometimes, if you're powering away or so intent on getting somewhere, you can often sort of forget to slow down and smell the roses, as it were. But lots of beautiful layering, lots of different areas. And it was, even in the peak of summer, there's often still some beautiful elements of snow out on those further peaks as well, which is really lovely. And having flown over a lot of these on the last workshop too, I was sort of looking at them in a slightly different light and thinking about which valleys to maybe fly down next time on the next workshop, which I've got coming up in April actually. And of course, had to get a selfie or two. Why not? It didn't look like it, but there's a very, very, very big drop under my feet. Enough that I wasn't game enough to stand on the end. And yeah, I think I'm nursing my new mountain biking pads there, which I just brought over for the trip, which I've got plenty of use out of. And I think my wrist is still strapped up from my latest pickleball tendon injuries. But anyway, sort of from behind to the front, that was a full 180 pano I just did with the phone. Phone's a great tool. I use it more and more all the time, and I have a very fluid relationship with it now because I use it all the time to transfer photos from my camera to my phone to edit as well. It's such a fast, easy, quick, and efficient way to get images out for stories and social media and just sharing as well. To be honest, I do that so much these days. Gave this bike a hell of a workout, but I gave it a beautiful clean by the end of it. Lots of gorgeous switchbacks on the way down. Beautiful views in different directions. Actually, Arrowtown is just back behind the hills over here, which we shifted our dates for this year, Lukey. So we've got the absolute peak week of the year for the
Yeah, I
colours.
saw that. This really is just the timing's insanely good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait, man. I'm so excited. And then this is actually two-thirds of the way down the mountain. Took me maybe. Oh, a good hour 20, I think, to ride all the way from the top of the mountain to the bottom. And, somebody spent a lot of time building all these extra trails in the bottom part of the mountain, which aren't so regularly used. And it's a big, big shuttle to do it. So huge thanks to Wes for that. And then I got geared up, put on the old pack, which has just been getting destroyed on airplane trips and not really being used for that many hikes for quite a while. And here I am, sort of geared up, ready to go into Fiordland. So I went with my oldest sister Ingrid and her family, my godson and nephew James, and my niece Olivia, and brother-in-law Dave. David's a ex-Olympic level rower, actually, and his brother's a triple world champion, triple gold medalist, triple sportsman of the year. In terms of rowing globally, and also he was a grinder on Team New Zealand for two campaigns, and that kind of family influence. So my sister now is in her 50s and is starting to run sort of half marathons and do Ironman training and all sorts of things. So I I was a bit intimidated going on this walk with them, and they've been doing a lot of hikes over the years as well. And even though I've been a bushwalking guide for 25 years and I still am, I actually just teared up for a trip. Oh, actually, that's a good point. It was meant to be on the Tarkine coast, actually, exactly where those fires are, in about a month's time. So we might have to have a few conversations there about what we're going to do in response. But yeah, it was nice to get dust off the old walking boots, and I think Fiordland's one of the last things I ever did before I left New Zealand to come to Australia and actually never came back, not knowing that I would, was do some big hikes in Fiordland. The Kepler track was the last walk that I did in the South Island 25 years ago before I sort of ended up living and moving into Tasmania. So it was a real kind of circle of coming back. I went super lightweight. I literally and I took no tripods. So I thought, well, I'm in Will Patino's territory in Fiordland. Maybe I'll take a leaf out of his book, as it were. And I only took two lenses, 1635 and a 24-105. And that was partly because I was with a bushwalking group, and as much as I tried to keep up with them, the second I took more than two photographs, they were gone, and I wouldn't see them for hours, and I could never catch up because they're fast walkers. So I kind of did spend a lot of the time on my own, but I spent a lot of that
But that is
shooting.
like a pretty big thing to sign up for too. Like you have to make a call at the start. I'm guessing like, am I a photographer on this trip or am I a walker? Because
Yeah.
it's they are kind of mutually exclusive. I don't think it's fortunate you almost have to always pick photographers to go walking with because you're otherwise you create this disparity which you're talking about. And yeah, it's kudos to you for sticking to your guns there and maybe doing
Well,
the solo thing.
I sort of had to negotiate it a little bit before and a little bit through the trip. I mean, it's not rocket science that they all know I'm a full-time professional photographer, landscape's my thing, but at the same time, I flew over to spend time with my family. So Ingrid, my big sis, she recognized that pretty early on, and she stayed behind with me several days for 3 4 hours to just talk and catch up and connect and I was actually teaching her how to take long exposures with her phone and do other things as well. So it was really nice. But there was certainly times in the middle of the day where I was left my own, or I'd negotiate that if they were going to get there earlier, I'd make sure I was there by certain times. They wouldn't have to worry about me. And in the evenings, we spent heaps of time together playing card games and doing photo shoots together with the kids and swimming. And because it wasn't dark till like quarter to 10 or something down there. So we had huge days to work with. So I actually did end up managing to do a little bit of both, which was really lovely. But there was certainly times where it was killing me not having a tripod. And other times where it was a blessing because when I was climbing up mountain passes and sweating like a dog and struggling, I was like, I'm so glad I don't have any more than I do. But what I didn't recognize about this trip, it was in two river valleys. It was kind of there's three river valleys kind of quite close to it. Three valleys close to it. There's the Rootburn, there's the Caples, and there's the Greenstone, and they all kind of wander out from a lake. The one that sort of reaches out from Queenstown, Whakatupua, I think it is, and they head out into Fiordland National Park. And what I actually was really surprised by, there was a huge amount of canyons and ravines sort of tucked away in secret little places on the walk, which even on, just looking on the topo maps, I didn't expect. I think there's a lot of karst country out there that I'd either forgotten about or wasn't so aware of. And I had done part of this walk maybe 25 years ago, actually probably 30 years ago, solo. I did the Rootburn Greenstone Loop on my own in winter. And yeah, about
Very nice.
28 years ago, I think. And so, but it was quite different from memory and it felt really fresh. And I hadn't been up the Caples before. And as much as it wasn't a great walk, the quality of the track was unbelievable. Um, so I sort of made a bit of a mistake. I brought one filter. I brought my six stop polarizer. So it's a six stop ND with a built in polarizer. And I thought, oh, that's a bit of everything in one filter to save weight. Polarization for the forest and the water and the creeks, and also the ability to slow down the exposures for because there was at least I knew there was at least I think I counted by the end of more than 27 different creek and river crossings we've done on this trip, and it was meant to rain for 4 days straight, well 3 days at least of the four, quite significantly, and I must have made the Wedget one again because it basically didn't really rain at all the whole trip, and it was perfect. I was in a t-shirt and shorts the entire time. But what I would have done differently, Lucky, is I would have just bought a single polarizer on its own because I sort of miscalculated a little bit. And that so many of the ravines and waterways were so under deep down in these ravines that they were so dark that the six stops was way over the top. And I'm trying
That's
to,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty interesting actually. I have the same thing. I first, it's like my first hike that I did in December, as I hadn't been hiking for a while. My filter kit just gradually got smaller and smaller until the last hike that I did. Literally just was the polarizer, like you're saying, in a little case so that I could take the polarizer off. But you're right. If you're in the forest, polarizer is more than enough, and I'll definitely
yeah,
associate
that
some
stop and a
shots
half
that are around
is
that too.
is fine. I ended up
Yeah,
having to, shoot some of these shots at 3200 ISO and stuff just to but you can see like the coloration is really beautiful with that glacial kind of water and picking up those extra blues and enriching the greens is and making them pop is a really lovely thing to be able to do. So I compromised. I did use it on some and I did on some of the others, but that was probably the one mistake I made. I sucked it up not having the uh the tripod, but that was yeah that was a it was a it was quite frustrating not to have the bigger not to have a more fine-tuned approach from a filter point of view. So I remember the next time, um, these modern camera systems, you can really, really push a lot of things and do a lot of stuff by hand that you couldn't before. And with water in particular, you don't really need a long shutter speed depending on what focal length you're using generally. So you can get away a lot of it by hand, half a second or even a second is not too bad. Depending on how steady you are, and I was leaning against trees or using rocks or putting it on my pack or leaning on bridges and a few places there were and things like that to try and get into that. But there was an area like this where I was like, oh my God, why do I not have my tripod with me? I had like 3 hours to shoot around these incredible gorges I didn't even know existed, what I would have just loved to have a tripod for. So I was, that's like a half a minute long exposure. So I was really limited in terms of the compositions I could get. based on having to, basically build a little rock platform or lean off something that was well, largely pre-existing, of course. It's quite limiting in terms of the angles you can get, but it was still worth having a play. So I might, if I did it again, I probably would bring a light tripod with me, to be honest. But I'd probably do it without doing a group of nine. It was actually nine of us. It was two families. So that's partly why it didn't work too well, sort of, and none of them were photographers, as it were. But just otherworldly, looky, just I was just there on my own for hours.
That's stunning. Wow.
It was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had in years, just having this ancient feeling canyon just to myself. And you can actually jump in the water just here and flow out into the lake through a gorgeous little ravine just here,
Would have been
which
so silent too.
it was so quiet. It was just unbelievably quiet. It was almost like it was almost just loud in its silence, which is an unusual way to describe something, but certainly how I experienced it, I'd say. Um, I you can there are huts, and New Zealand's quite different in that so many of the walks have huts, and it wasn't until I left New Zealand I realised that for most bushwalking places they don't. I thought it was just a thing that of bushwalking in general, so I couldn't get into all the huts. So I think one night I couldn't get into, so I ended up carrying all my tenting gear the whole time. But at the same time, so it's a bit of a cultural experience, the huts, because you might have 24 people sleeping in one room, just all squished together, and so it's a very what's the word, community orientated experience. But you get a few bad snorers, or everyone's all wet and smelly from a big day out. It's that's part of the culture of it, and I didn't have to worry about that at all. And this was a view out of my tent window on that first night, I think. This was crossing the valley in the back here was what we came up, and this is one of the passes that we came up over the top of. And we're just starting to get into the subalpine kind of area here. But this is weather a lot of the trip, just beautiful, soft light, just so easy to shoot in. Really diffuse in the forest. It was just absolutely perfect. Crank out at least one selfie. I think I wiped off a large amount of sweat before I took that photograph because I was feeling it going up the hill, but it was good to know I could still do it. We had to cross a lot of these. They're basically, big spills from the mountain ranges, and there's large areas and slips actually through a lot of it, which can be very difficult to cross in the rain, actually, especially ones that are still kind of made of fresh soil rather than actual, physical structures that are established to go past, and that's part of Alpine New Zealand. We're really up high there. I'm not super on top of all the geology of everything there, but yeah, it just adds a lot of its own sort of atmosphere, and it really lends beautifully to black and white photography as well. So there's my family. This is my big sis. She's kind of like the matriarch of the family. This is Dave, her husband, my brother-in-law, the ex-rower. This is Jay Moss, who's my godson and nephew, and my niece Olivia. Some of the fittest, most fun, most down-to-earth people you'll meet on this planet and in my whole life, and I love them to bits. So it's beautiful to share that with them. There's a couple, those are the parents of the other family that we went out with, and they've been, I think, 9 years in a row they've done a trip, and they do it before Christmas, the week before Christmas, which when you think about it is a really, really good time to do a trip in terms of avoiding the crowds, being a bit off shoulder season-ish, less people around, more opportunity to get into places that are hard to get to, and by the time you get to Christmas, you're already feeling fit and are ready to just relax and celebrate and not feel guilty about how much you're eating or, or how much you're drinking, I suppose. Here's another amazing gorge that I found, and if I had more time, I would have found a way to get in there down the bottom and walk through. But that was again, I just heard it basically and didn't even know it was there. And I slowly started getting more and more mindful as I learned sort of how much sort of karst geology is in the landscape to be present to that. Another one of my favorite aspects is these huge, big swinging bridges. This one's quite an old one, actually. It doesn't look like it, but it is. And it's a little bit on the wrecky side, and it's super skinny. Like you literally got to lean forward to stop the edge of your pack catching the sides. And you don't want to be bouncing up and down too much, or you feel like you're on a yo-yo string. And it's quite high, actually, this one. It's a fairly big drop underneath, and so you're pretty happy they're there. And rivers are a huge aspect of bushwalking, particularly in the South Island of New Zealand, and they're a make or break factor on those trips. And there are a lot of people that haven't made it home because they've made poor decisions around around rivers when the rivers come up and you're running out of food and it's the only way out and you decide to take a risk. There's a lot of people that have been down that road. That's actually one of my favorite shots of the trip. It was interesting how easily the shots in that kind of light move lent just as beautifully to black and white as it did to color, sort of so easily. There's probably a lot more I could go back through and convert to sort of color. Um, but it was, yeah, nice, and I just sort of want to create something a little bit more graphical and sort of well balanced in terms of not just a story, but a bit more of an artistic piece. Again, that's the view out of my tent in the morning. That was a beautiful mountain range. I just watched the sun meander over for the afternoon and down, and it was quite nice actually have all this extra daylight and get places early enough that I can still explore and shoot and see how many more million mosquito bites I could add to my collection, growing collection. Oh, speaking of which, this was the fastest photo shoot of my life, Lukey. Like these two here, I shot them both in about 90 seconds. I think I
Oh, no, nice.
probably took on about 157 mosquito bites in that 90 seconds.
And
I
they're not
walked
just they're sandflies, aren't they? They're worse than mozzies, in my opinion.
yeah, sandflies. They're smaller
Yeah,
and
that they
oh,
itch for way longer. I hate
oh
them.
God.
Couldn't put
The
up with
bites aren't quite as
that.
big, but they're prolific. And Fiordland is famous for it. There's old mythologies about them being the from the Māori perspective, them being the guardians of the landscape. And oh my God, they are. But I pulled out the camera after running down there, and I reckon within 10 seconds, I think I counted about 45 mosquitoes on my hand alone, let alone my legs and everywhere else. And so I was trying to shoot and wave them off at the same time and do long exposures without a tripod, and I got the hell out of there. But it was a really beautiful shot to shoot, had a really sort of majestic feel about it down there. And actually, just I think I got there right down at sunset. The others have been down there swimming about an hour before, and they weren't complaining about it. So they're either tougher than me, or I got the sunset slam, as you could probably call it. This was a beautiful hut. You actually went an extra extended sort of area. You walked down a valley and over some rivers and through some chasms up into a little area just to camp near the end of the walk that we did, which we did in an anti sort of clockwise direction. Um, we sort of get up close to where the route burn. I think we actually connect with the Reefspoon track, or very close to the route burn track. And then you loop back down into the Greenstone Valley. The cables is a bit narrower and the Greenstone's a bit wider. Cable's track is probably a little bit more robust, and the Greenstone track is a little bit more prone to flooding and mud and slips and different things, but they've done a pretty good job of pushing it out to the side. But just such luminosity in these forests. They're beech forests, which if you hadn't been in a beech forest, they're in South America in large tracts as well as, from the old Gondwana land connections with New Zealand as well. But certainly not something you find much of in Australia, and they just have their own personality to them. They feel very old and very well established, and you just feel really privileged walking through them. They're very quiet. They have a beautiful kind of open underscorey sort of feel to them, so you don't feel too closed in. You feel like there's a little bit of breathing room as you're wandering through them. But the track and all the way they've designed them are just so superb. It's rare, I think, Lucky. I've been on a walk, a bushwalk in particular, where I felt like I could have taken a photograph every minute of the entire walk. I'm not even joking. I don't think I'm even exaggerating. It was just materially everywhere from
Like my
macro to
experience of
micro.
walking with you though, when you have the camera out every minute, but if there's one person that could say that it's you, but I do I that's I think if I ever took you up to the Western Arthurs or something like that, you'd find the same thing too
Oh my
probably.
God. Yeah, I know. I'm hoping they don't get caught up in these fires, but I think at the end there, I slowed down a little bit at the end, and I timed it so I knew I'd make the end of the walk at the same time as them. But obviously, I had to get there because we had a very tight turnaround. We literally went straight through the end of the walk to the plane and jumped on, so there wasn't a lot of room for error. Um, Probably my favorite black and white of the trip, which came right near the end, and this tucked away little ravine. And I just had a little bit of, I just gifted myself with maybe 20, 30 minutes to actually slow down and just shoot this area. Just had beautiful dappled light running through. I had a little bit of bouncing light coming from afar in the valley below. I had a top-down sort of view. I could access different places to do long exposures just with the features that were already there. Um, and just delicate but beautiful and pointed. And it just felt like, yeah, it was just a special moment. Often when you go on a deep sort of wilderness immersion, it's often that last day or the furthest point that you far away from civilization and the most deeply immersed in an experience like that, and that was sort of my time. These sort of 4 or 5 photographs, I was just really, really feeling that, just how special it was, and it does feel so old and ancient. This landscape, it does feel like dinosaurs could be roaming around. It just really, really, really has that feel about it. And of course, you're working up the sweat. Good time to swim. Definitely pretty fresh in the water, but really beautiful. And this is how sculpted and magical the tracks are. You just feel like you're walking through fairyland, and it's really technically not a difficult walk, this one, which I was quite unexpected to me. I didn't realize it was going to be quite so yellow brick road in some of the places, but that was really refreshing. And at the same time, we'd push out onto the rivers and walk down some riverways ourselves, and that's a very telling image for to sum up the summer adventures for the show graphic. Actually, this one. I literally went straight from there to the nearest bakery, of course, which is pretty traditional after most wilderness trips that I do, and beautiful Glenorchy there, and then we zipped straight out to the airport. But final goodbyes to this is the Greenstone River here, and Greenstone, if you didn't know, is where Ponamu comes from. The Greenstone stone, the one that I'm wearing around my neck right now, is from a river from Te Waiponamu, which is actually the name for the South Island, water and Ponamu stone. And to the Māori people, it's quite precious because it's only found in these high alpine rivers, and they didn't generally live in those areas. They live more coastally generally, or more inland. And they did big. It took a lot of work to do these big alpine crossings, and the stone's incredibly heavy and incredibly difficult to carve. So it became a hugely valuable resource culturally in the Māori culture, and it's considered inappropriate to take it for yourself because of all the value that's imbued in it by how difficult it is to find and how difficult it is to carve. It becomes more of a community resource. But it was nice to bathe my greenstone in the Greenstone River. I think these stones they like it when they're back in the water. I was definitely feeling it. I think I lost feeling in one of my toes for about 3 weeks after that trip. I think I overdid it. Look, yeah, put an extra
That long. Whoa.
yeah, to put an extra layer of cushioning in my shoes to make it a bit softer because they're really hard. And it feels like whacking concrete. And it was really hard to find one that had the right shape because most of them just have a high heel and they have a flat front. And it was actually the front one needed the padding, so it was tricky. And so I had this super tight fit on the boots, which made them feel really comfortable and really confident in terms of moving around in slippery terrain and rocks. But I think overall they were tighter than I thought and actually cut out a bit of circulation. And with big days, they were 9 hour days. It was often 22 Ks walking a day for some of the bigger days. So it was a lot of walking, a lot of time on the boots, a bit of weight. So yeah, I didn't realize that till after the trip. I was like, oh, how come I can't quite feel my toes properly? And the other thing we didn't realize is how dusty the roads are. So this is our bus trip, not looking abreast and trying to breathe through, breathe through the shirts because it was so freaking dusty on the way back. It was crazy. And there's actually about 5 or 6 fjord crossings that aren't actually passable some of the time, even for the vans to come and pick you up. So that's a bit exciting. So back on Christmas Eve, this is the better part of my Kiwi family. And we had the boys, the older boys. This is my nephew Matthew, who's on scholarship to Berkeley, and his Dutch sort of world-class athlete rowing girlfriend who came along over. This is Jamos, my nephew, and his new girlfriend. And we'd never had the girlfriends before, so that was pretty fun. This is my niece Olivia, who was on the walk. My younger sister Natalie, my beautiful mama bear, my other sister Andrea, her daughter, her son. Natalie's 2 daughters here and here. And it's just really special, man. I mean, you managed to do the same thing, Luke. You go home with family, and there's nothing quite like it. So yeah, lots of beautiful girls in my family. I don't know what happened to me, but it's nice to be around them all. They're super fun. Anyway, another family adventure with the same family was riding the Timber Trail. The Timber Trail is a beautiful historical trail on the west side of Lake Taupo in the Pururua forest. And it's about 88 kilometers in length. So you normally do it in 2 days. It's so long that the bike hire company that you use actually won't hire you a bike if you're trying to do it in a day because the amount of people that have tried and failed is has gone beyond and had to be rescued in the dark has gone on gone on way too long, he said. So we did the first half. Oh, sorry, the second half of the trip, which was about 42 Ks. And Dave, being Dave, said, stuff it. He went at 4 in the morning and rode the first half on his own before he even met up with us. So he did the full 88, but he was in training for a big 140 kilometer ride, I think. So riding across bridges like this is quite exciting because you're up quite high on one of those bikes, and it feels like if you tip over, you're gonna end up where you don't belong. But at the same time, had to give it a go. While in Rome, they're beautifully made. Um, so pretty user-friendly trip for bikes and walking actually. Yeah, and there's a combination of both. It's used by both sort of mediums, as it were. We did have some blown out tires though, and a little bit exciting. Trying to find out what the heck it was going on with everyone because there's no mobile coverage out there at all. It's quite remote. Um, this was just after a downhill race, which I actually won. I was pretty excited by it. I think I was going to beat my nephews, although to be fair, I had a slight head start, which was pretty fun. But all along the trail is just pockets of history, mainly from sort of woodcutting days and the ingenious ways that Kiwis have managed to get through really difficult landscapes. It's a really, really, really difficult landscape to get through and around, and very mountainous and full of all sorts of steep gullies, and you can see the etchings. This is actually an old tramway that they built, carved out of the side of the rocks and the side of the mountains, and the evidence is just kind of everywhere, and it's a real beautiful part of the whole walk. It's actually a phone shot, Lucky. I was experimenting with the old iPhone long
Don't
exposures.
knock it. I used it
Yeah.
heaps as well. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, it's gotta be pretty damn still though, doing it by hand. If there's elements of movement, because it's basically like I think 6 or 7 photos blended together to go from in live mode, at least on an iPhone it is anyway. And I was kind of doing it by hand, but I managed to pull one off anyway. Um, Beautiful trails, gorgeous, gorgeous to walk through. Very diverse, especially at the end. And that's very, very typical kind of what they call King Country, which is the area they're in. It's kind of limestone karst country as well. A lot of really interesting rock structures, but so much of the North Island of New Zealand is looking like this. Rolling green hills. So more riding again. This time closer in a place called Kinloch, which is on the northwest side of Taupo. And my sister's like, "Oh, do you want to be my backup support? I'm doing a 21K run, training for a half marathon." So I was like, I don't know if I can ride that far, let alone run it. But I volunteered and I managed to pull it off. I did have a pretty bad stack, and I still got the scars to prove it on my arm, actually. Trying to keep up with her, and I went a bit fast in a few tucked away places, but it was pretty beautiful. And a very, very different note, on the other side of my family, on my brother-in-law's side from my younger sister Natalie, they are a very old racing car family. And the father, or grandfather, as it were, Warren, has been racing for almost 50 years now, and his father raced before him. And he started off racing on mining sites in Vanuatu, of all places in the world, doing dirt racing, and he's collected. You can see Mortimer Motorsports as the brand there, and they invited me down to come shoot a historical race. So not quite landscapes, but I thought I'd throw it in out of interest. And this car is one of the most famous sort of cars in McLaren history, actually. This one here is, I believe, arguably the loudest car in the world. They turned it on inside this tent, and I don't think my hearing's ever been the same since because I didn't realize that. And I was kind of asked to document behind the scenes and the unsung heroes of all the mechanics that have been working with these cars for years. They're so lightweight. Everything is sort of fiberglass and carbon fiber to be put on. And this is actually a Le Mans racing car. It was actually raced in Le Mans historically. And so they were brought out. I have a museum actually that he has about 12 or 13 very famous cars. And well, this is Paul Radisich, and he's the kind of guy I grew up watching race. And he actually went out in one of the historic cars and had it around the track. Warren himself went out in the McLaren here. And just the sound of them is one of the most strangely beautiful sounds in the world. I'm not really a petrol head at all. In fact, I got mixed feelings about the whole industry, really. But at the same time, I really appreciate the design and the uniqueness of all these different vehicles that were just created for a singular purpose, with all sorts of different people involved and the thoughts and mechanics and both of them were both Andre and Warwick were were racing that weekend as well. They had a lot of mechanical issues, unfortunately, but it was nice to get them out on the big cars. So I was just like, oh, how do you shoot this sort of stuff, And a lot of old classics out there, a lot of really proud people. It was I kind of do anything once, and it was nice to sort of be part of a different culture that I haven't really been a part of at all. And it was super well attended and really well enjoyed. And of course, I've got no commercial outlet for these, so I'm just trying to have fun and do what I like. And so I was trying to get that sense of flow and movement. These are the Indy races. I think they're called Indy 500s. Super, super fast, really light. Quite small cars actually, and very low to the ground, but super fast. So I was just visualizing some of these layers and trying to get that sense of speed. And it was very limiting where I could shoot because I couldn't get hold of a media pass because I didn't have actually motorsport accreditation, which kind of took me by surprise actually that they took it that far. But it's quite dangerous shooting around the track, and I think there's a fair bit of training and understanding about where you can and can't be in terms of positioning yourself around the track. And people have died from wheels flying off and different things who haven't been in the right places, so they're quite mindful and about that. But I had a good crack at it, and then a bit more riding around Lake Taupo, lots of riding, Lucky. And Lake Taupo is a huge lake in the central North Island. It's actually an old volcanic crater. And that is Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings. That's Ngātahoe. And there's also Ruapehu just next to it. And this is the famous area for the Tongariro crossing. Well, actually, I think that's Tongariro. I didn't get there on this trip, even though conditions were so perfect, because I would have had to have been a bit selfish and spent a couple of days away from my family to do it, even though conditions were good. But I've done it quite a few times. But just riding around the lake in itself is just absolutely stunning. But then my nephew Josh and I fueled up the jet ski and went on a big adventure. And this is to these gorgeous, kind of famous, quite white cliffs. There was a big earthquake, I think, that's actually destroyed a lot of it, but it was still a gorgeous place to go. And so we were trying to think, where can we go on the lake that hasn't been? Like we were, we were actually clocking over 100 k's an hour on the jet ski. But even Josh said, I've never seen conditions as perfect. Often you get a little patch in the morning or late in the day, but not in the middle of the day like we got. So we had a good adventure, and I sort of thought about bringing a big camera. I ended up just bringing the phone, but at the same time, in bright light like this, it does a fairly good job. And we found this island right on the bottom, sort of southeast corner of the lake that neither of us knew anything about. And so we did a big exploration around it, and we found these stunning little ravines and waterways and different sort of gullies and places. I climbed up in on the island and looked for a few jumping spots just for something fun to do. And this was the most mysterious and beautiful place we got to, and I thought, oh, what a beautiful place to take a portrait of Joshie as well. Um, and a special time doing adventures. It's I don't know if it's a kind of uncle thing to do, but it's you just make such great memories by getting out there and doing things with people, rather than just talking on the phone. It's the unspoken, not a lot of speaking needs doing when you go on these. You just give each other a quiet nod and recognize you've done something really special together. So I got home from the beautiful trip. I think it was 5, 6 weeks there, and first thing I did is I thought, of course, what do I love doing in the summer in Tasmania, and that's heading out to Maria Island. And Maria Island is a beautiful island just off the east coast of Tasmania, about an hour north of Hobart. And you catch a ferry from a little town called Tribunna. It's only 25 minutes, and you get this beautiful island to yourself, full of wildlife, full of incredible history. I think we've spoken about it in some ways on the show over the years. This is the Commissario store, and this is the leftovers of part of the concrete works that were there. It's been a penitentiary, it's been an emu farm, it's been a concrete factory, it's been a winery. It's had this most eclectic wild history. And one of the more interesting parts of it was the cement factory that they put together in the 20s. And there's this huge fossil cliffs on the north side of the island, northwest side of the island. Northern side, and that those fossils are hundreds of millions of years old, but of course that's what they were mining because they're calcium carbide to make the concrete out of in the 20s. So national park now, there's no cars there. Best way to get around is by bike, arguably, although it's beautiful walking as well. A little bit tricky bringing an e-bike over there these days, Lucky. They make you take the battery out because they're quite concerned about it. That was one of those 20, 30-second moments where, yeah, I blinked and it was gone, but it was pretty beautiful to catch. Just those guide rays just from the last sun. Like, one of those sunsets where you think, oh, you haven't quite got a horizon cap, but you can kind of see a hint of it, and it manages to give you a little gem, which was really lovely. And out on the north side of the island in particular, when you do a big loop ride, there's two families of eastern grey kangaroos, and there's not really any anywhere else in Tasmania apart from a few families up in the far northeast in Mount William National Park. They've all no longer exist in Tasmania for various reasons, but it's nice to come across those families and spend a bit of time with them. And they're quite curious about you, but they're quite used to people, and they're right next to a landing strip actually. Not commonly used, it's just a grass strip, but there is a field out there. And again, beautiful place to ride. That's my good friend Keiko. He's watching right now. Hello, Keiko. And I got her out on my trusty e-bike, and so she's fanging around the mountain like no tomorrow, and f-stop all the way. Little moments that I haven't done. I've been shooting there for 25 years, and just often I like to look at things I haven't done before. And I just noticed the window of the commissariat looking when I was just going past it. I thought, wait a minute, there's a nice little glow there. And so I sort
Very
of,
tasty. I like
yeah,
that one.
included the sunset and the glow, which was nice to do. And there was this beautiful kind of soft afterglow, really warm, kind of encompassing light. And I just got, actually, that's probably my favorite photograph from the trip, actually, because normally I focus on that high area and the more obvious areas of it, but also sort of like the hint of land and back on both of these sort of in the background there. And I remember early on, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, I took some photo shooting up from the bottom, and it won the highest scoring print in Tasmania that year in the state awards because no one could recognize what it was. There you go. Coco's just sending me an emoji. So Coco hadn't shot auroras before, and there was a big one that hit and a beautiful one. And unfortunately, the northwest tip of Maria is not the best place to shoot auroras because there's no super clear south-facing sort of areas that don't have a bit of landmass in the way. But we decided to ride down there in the dark anyway and give it a crack. And that's actually the Pater Cliffs there, Looky, just below. So we just
Yeah,
went
there's a
uphill
nice
from
south-facing
Darlington.
aspect
Yeah, and
there.
that's pretty much south facing, like the down here, or that's yeah, probably is the bottom of the island kind of faces a little bit more. Southwest is a little bit clearer, but not so much straight south. I did see the comet, and I got one shot, and I raced back to get Coco and came back, and I could swear I was back within 20 minutes, and there was no comet anymore, and I was like, where the hell did it go? I still haven't figured it out. So. The big thing about Arroyos is if you really want a great shot, you need a good foreground, and that's generally something you want to research during the day. So stumbling around in the dark like I was in a new place is not the best place to try and find foregrounds, but I did what I could. Very telling in terms of, the man-made, satellites and stuff all over the place on these shoots. When I first got there, the comet was right here. So it must have just dipped below the horizon or something looking. I mean, look,
Got
he was
some
out.
shots from the same evening and my like just a different perspective, but we're shooting at the same time. So there you go.
And Keiko got the best shot of the night, so good on her. She got a beautiful vertical shot here because that's actually the galaxy core there, coming up vertical. But yeah, unusual in the amount of sort of man-made activity that I saw that night when I was shooting, and also the comet, and also the Milky Way at the same time. It was and I sort of had that in mind. I was going back to sleep. It was already 3 in the morning, and I was pretty tired. And I thought, oh. There's still the aurora sort of happening, and it's a bit more blocked the view from Darlington, which is where you generally stay at Maria. And I thought I'll have a go, and I got up there, and I think I was down here till 5 o'clock trying to shoot this, and I was setting the shot up. Of course, I couldn't see what I was shooting. I slowly realized there was a galaxy core lining up with the shot, and also the Milky Way, and I probably had about 15 attempts to actually get this composition, to be honest, with the Magellan Cloud as well. But then I was doing the light painting as well in the mix, and it was too strong flat on, so I'd literally run out for every single photograph and do sideways lighting to get a little bit of shaping from side on. So don't think I've seen a shot like that before, and I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to do it again, but it was fun to do. And last but not least, literally last weekend, I went out with my friend Keiko again, actually, and we went out to see the Red Bull Hardline, which is arguably the most gnarly downhill race in the world. And it's purposely built to be so. These first few images are actually from the Jump Jam, which is one of the events that happens right at the beginning of the main 3 days. Hardline is basically a combination of downhill and jumps. This was just called a Jump Jam. So some of the guys crossed over between both, and some of the downhill riders were doing this as well. But really, these are some of the best guys in the world. There's a pretty young fella, Riley, that was just absolutely killing it. I got this 10-shot sequence looking of that whole jump. And I've been a rider my whole, 25 years, and it was just kind of astonishing and scary to see what these guys are doing. I was equally horrified as I was inspired. Um, but it was really fun to photograph. I went out 3 days in a row in the end, and I passed on some of these to the riders as well. This is a Kiwi rider um, from Queensland actually, and this is the guy Jared Byrne who won the jump jam in the end. But it was nice to sort of tie in a little bit of landscape into the shots as well, which I actually tried to do for a lot of the event. Rather than doing really, really tight shots of just the riders, which are quite common because it's, that's your number and you see the face. I sort of focus a little bit more on the broader landscape. This is the actual race itself. And this is, you can't even see the end of the jump is probably about 40, 30 feet over to the left somewhere, and the start of the jump's about there. And that's straight after coming on the back of another jump. It was just scarily astonishing what they're doing. And it was difficult to shoot in the forest and to make them stand out because they disappear against the trees and lots of dappled lighting as well. I didn't manage to get a media pass, so I had to stay on the one side of the track where everybody was. And you might not know, I actually had to climb a tree to get these photographs, which was not easy. And the media guys they actually got the spots on the other side of the track free of all the public, so they got a lot better. But I didn't want to know what that drop looked like from the top. And it's straight into a massive hardcore boom straight away and straight into this jump, like straight from one to the other. Like this is the whole track is like that. It's just one of the craziest things you've ever done in your life. Straight into the next of one of the craziest things you've ever done in your life with some of the fastest sections in between. So it was really interesting. You don't have long. So you've got maybe 30 riders and you've got 2 or 3 seconds to shoot. So if you do up the maths on how long a shooting time that is, that's just a few minutes. So, and this is a 4.5 kilometer long track. So if you want to get a variety of shots, you've got a haul ass between riders and you don't quite know if or when the next rider's coming. So it's actually quite a difficult thing to shoot in terms of getting a lot of variety. I had to really, really work it pretty hard. And it's why I needed a few days too. And there was a section now, if you walk down to the next part of the track, you have to walk inland for 25 minutes. So you'd miss 3 or 4 of those. And the end day was only 23 riders, I think. So you had to make all these calculated decisions about who you're willing to miss and which shots you're going to go for and which riders to get. That looks like, that I'm pretty sure that is the eventual winner actually. Jackson Goldstone. So this guy totally KO'd himself on this track the year before, like destroyed himself to the point where he couldn't even get on a bike for half a year. It was that bad. And the first event he came back to racing was this for over a year, and he won it. So massive testament to his sort of courage and perseverance and rebuilding of his body and his mindset because these things are massive. Like you can't even see where they drop from here. There's about a 70-foot drop straight into another berm, straight into another flying corner. Like it seriously insane. But the proximity to it was incredible. To be able to get that close to the riders. They only let that happen on the race. During practice time, you were allowed anywhere near it. That's, I think, Matt Jones, I think it was, doing a huge backflip off the back there. And the crowds are massive. They sold 6,000 tickets, so it's a big event. And it was filmed live by Red Bull TV as well. You can look it up. And I well recommend looking up the final racing run of Jackson. I'll just finish up soon, Licky, so I can get your time in the sun. But again, pretty risky doing long exposure shots when you've only got literally, 22 opportunities to take even a single photograph in a whole day, and you want to throw away these risky ones. But I thought, stuff it, I'll throw it out. This is an 84-foot long gap jump. I couldn't even tell you how far away the original part of that jump was from what you're seeing right now. It was one of those craziest things I've ever seen in my life. And yes, I did see people that did not make it, and it was not pretty. I watched one of the girls actually, who didn't make the jump properly, and she didn't move for about 20 minutes and got taken off in taken off to hospital. There was another major rider, Ronan, who was cleaned up really, really badly further up on the track and is in hospital as well. And the numbers pilfered down. And they actually have wind socks on these jumps, Luke, because it's so critical. What the wind's doing, it could literally blow them off their landing. And
Oh,
so they had to adjust their line and
no.
actually make judgment calls about whether they were even going to try at all to do the jumps relative to what the wind was doing. And luckily, it was reasonably low, but there was some times where they didn't do it. So a little bit of a taste of my summer, and just kind of, I'm pretty thirsty. I'm one of those people that is quite happy to try new things and different things all the time. And this was pretty special for me though, because I am a mountain bike rider and seeing the best of the best doing some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And there's Jackson Goldstone literally on his winning run on the last ride of the day. And by then I kind of knew the shot that I wanted, so I set it up on purpose to try and get it. Cranking out 20 frames a second, Lukey. So there you go. That's me. That's me. And a taste of my summer. A lot of it was just wrapped up in quality family time, to be honest. But I never really am too far away from bringing a camera with me. Also did some really good surfing over there too at my favourite break, Raglan, and my beautiful home away from home that I grew up with on the west coast beaches in Piha and Tahinga, out west of Auckland, which I dearly, dearly love. So pretty amazing summer, Lukey. Pretty spoiled, mate. And
I feel the same. We're very, very
wow.
lucky to be able to do what we do for our job. I guess we have there's probably easier paths in life to take though, you could say. So there is that in terms of
Maybe more
you know,
secure ones anyway.
yes, well that's yes, definitely the case. But I've got a whole bunch of shots here too. So my problem is that I'm horrible at editing stuff. So you guys will have to um basically bear with me because what you're going to witness now, and my lights decided to keep turning off, is stuff that is not finished at all. Although, probably a lot of Paul's, if you're going to put it into a competition or do something different, you're obviously going to refine the images as well. But my images they're very, very quick edits, and you'll probably see there's quite a quantity. And I guess if I'm just looking at my Lightroom catalog now, so far in if I just go show photos in subfolder, so far in 2025 I've taken 10,000 images, and in January sorry, in
Wow.
December I took 6,700 images. So there's, even though it's only summer's we're almost finished, but yeah, it's still almost 20,000 images to go through. That's for various reasons, but it's been like, it's actually less than I've taken in other years, and that's because in other years I've been fortunate to be in Antarctica. I actually am going to Antarctica in April, or sorry, in March, so in autumn, not in summer like this time. So it's been really amazing to be able to spend some time actually at home for summer, and Tasmania. I forgot how beautiful it actually is in summer. Definitely starts to brown off sort of mid-January and into February. And so, but being able to get out into the bush and see it in just some incredible conditions has been extremely meaningful to me. And so I am pretty excited to show you these shots, although I will say, as I said before, that you just have to consider that I am not the most organized man sometimes, but that's okay. So let's go to library. Sorry about this, guys. I'm just going to make sure that the my screen shows up on the other screen that I share to. Perfect. And if I go to loop here, I should be right to share. All right. And I've got my story to come through now. So let's share to the screen. You're all very patient people. Thanks for bearing with me. There we go. And this is my first shot. I call it Astro Gone Wrong. No, here we go. All right. So first day of summer. I had a pretty amazing morning, and this was actually a location called Waterfall Bay,
Oh,
and that's on Tasman Peninsula. And what happened was, I can't even remember what. what I was doing the day before, but I was coming back from somewhere, and I had to drop off my partner very early in the morning for a flight, and I was like, it's really foggy and really unusual day, so
It
and it
was,
just
wasn't
poured with rain, and so because I was up and I thought, well, Waterfall Bay should be flowing. So, but what I didn't realize was that Waterfall Bay also had this really amazing layer of fog coming through. And so, which does tend to happen on the Tasman Peninsula. You get these really amazing kind of, sorry, this,
it? Yeah,
you get
I
these
haven't
really
seen it much. I
amazing
haven't seen
kind
it
of,
much.
what was that?
I haven't seen that much myself.
Yeah, and so you get these sea mists, and so this one just happened to hang around, and I've tried it in a few different treatments and things like that. Definitely prefer the black and white. I'm a big fan of black and white,
Mm.
and then I tried a bit of a longer exposure, and you can sort of see that's a shorter exposure there, and then this was a sort of longer one with color. I didn't have a. I could do that as a. I don't know if V's gonna get me there. Yeah, so that's going to be pretty nice as a black and white too. Unfortunately, I had a whole bunch of dust spots all over the thing, but it was just a really beautiful start to summer. I remember thinking, "Oh, this is going to be an amazing summer if it sort of starts like this." So that was that, and so yeah, definitely great location on Tasman Peninsula. If you haven't been out there, if you're ever in Tassie or you live around that area, if you get a big dump of rain, you get this beautiful waterfall coming off of the cliff here, and it's just out of past Eagle Hawk Neck. I also just listed a workshop on the Tasman Peninsula as well on Sony Scene. So you're welcome to check that out, and Waterfall Bay will be one of the shoot locations for that. That's going to be in May. So I'll no doubt you'll hear some more information about that small group workshop and with the idea of trying to get some aurora, well, sorry, aurora, hopefully aurora, but also Milky Way over tessellated pavement. Um, Awesome. And so then I one of the other things I got up to was I was invited to the launch of a product. So this is more of a commercial thing, launch of Pennicot's Cape Rail cruises. And I was actually really fortunate to be the photographer for these guys. So I actually photographed on a separate occasion the product or their cruise actually out under Cape Rail. It's actually going to be another thing that we'll do on the Tasman Peninsula workshop. And here's the premiere sort of opening, and I provided these images to the Pennicots as well. Just sort of christening the boat. It was nice to be invited to the opening, given that I did the photos, and they said it don't treat the photographer as some sort of a leper or something that like second class citizens. So that's always nice. No, that they're really great to work with, and so if you're ever at Port Arthur, they do these beautiful boat cruises out to Cape Rail, and these are some of the seals at the base of Cape Rail. And yeah, really great opportunities for wildlife photography. These aren't going to be award-winning professional images. This wasn't a client shoot. This was just me going along and being invited to actually enjoy it rather than being the actual photographer that time.
Oh, cool.
So that was really nice. You get a really great view of Cape Pillar as well, and just to the right here's actually Tasman Island as well. So the
So
routes.
people that didn't know, these are the largest sea cliffs in the southern hemisphere of the world.
Yeah, yeah. That's where the
Huge.
Three Capes track goes. It's probably the pinnacle of the Three Capes track is actually walking up over this blade right at the end here. So yeah, it's really great little cruise, and it's only about an hour and a half, but you see heaps during that time, and easy to fit within your day. And then yeah, sort of Cape Rail's really amazing. Sort of reminds me of a tale of a crocodile or dinosaur or something like that. Just a really interesting coastline. And if you get the Pennicot's brochure for for this trip, there's you'll see all my photos in there
Do you
taken
know the
from
story of
there.
if you go back to that photo, Luke, of the British Navy in the 50s use
Yeah.
the pillars as target practice?
Yeah, they were like peppering all of these guys, and no doubt some of these are, some of them were actually much taller, and they used those pillars as yeah target practice, which is pretty sad. There might be a gannet or something. Yeah, there's a gannet up there as well. So there you go. And so yeah, just a bit of the rugged coastline, some really interesting coves and things. Obviously, I'm not going to win any photography competitions with this, but it's a I don't know if it might
Oh,
look
I don't think I've
okay in
seen
black and
those.
white.
Is that,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, some really interesting coastline through there, and certainly even from an intimate abstract type perspective, could be quite interesting. And yeah, just another view of Cape Rail there, and yeah, one of the park's employees sort of trying to. It's always nice to put a person, sense of place, sense of adventure, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
Telling a story. So black and white. I've gotten a bit onto a bit of a black and white phase lately, and I've been really loving it. And you'll see plenty of black and whites coming up. All right, so that was the Cape Rail cruises. Now this is the next adventure I did. So this was mid December, and I went with my dear friend, well, our dear friend Andrew Phipps, into the walls of Jerusalem. Unfortunately, I haven't really edited a lot of these shots at all. So these are all just like a real smattering of all sorts.
I'm sorry I missed it, Lucky. I was hoping to come on this one, but I was
Yeah,
flying to New
just
Zealand
before you left.
hours
Yeah.
after the end of the trip, and I was like,
But
ah,
we got incredibly lucky with the weather, which is always necessary with these sort of walks. And this is pretty much the entryway, probably the first shots I was taking on the trip actually, because this is as you're coming into this area, which is that's called Wild Dog Creek Campground, and then you actually walk up between here, up this pass. I think it's called Herod's Gate, and then into the sort of highland area or the Alpine Plateau above, which is known as the Walls of Jerusalem. And so really haven't had a
okay.
really good chance to actually explore in the walls. And when I've been there in subsequent prior years, these areas were really dry, and I don't even remember there being a reflective pool in this particular area. So it was really nice to be able to explore a little bit and find some compositions and actually spend quite a bit of time just run. I think well, it takes about 7 or 10 Ks to get up there, and I think I did more hiking around the place when we're up on the plateau than it took to go in and out because I was exploring so much and trying to find things. Beautiful alpine pools surrounded by pencil pines and things like that. You get these like really nice mists that come off early in the morning and a bit of alpenglow on the top there. I always wanted to get a shot of this too. It's amazing how this track goes between these cushion plants, and then the west wall or King David's Peak there in the distance is all illuminated in the alpenglow. And it's just a really astounding place to be. Very chilly, actually, quite surprisingly cold. It was freezing cold, and I had to scrape ice off the tent in the morning, and all my shoes were frozen. So it just really calls out how in December you can still get extremely cold conditions in Tasmania. And when they say, pack a four-season tent or pack a sleep, a sub-zero sleeping bag, it's for good reason. Especially when you get these beautiful clear nights. It's a really good one to keep in mind. And yeah, just so you can see, I kind of went back to some compositions and tried it in different light. And it's always good to have options and choose different things. Yeah. So speaking of how cold it was, this is
Wow.
a dead quoll that I found, and yeah, unfortunately, this little guy, but he's actually totally crusted in frost. And you have to be very careful on these boardwalks because if you don't have the this chicken wire here, there's some sections where it's worn off. It's just as slippery as ice, and I did stack it a few times because the boardwalk was actually completely iced up. So surprisingly cold for that time of year. I thought I had a few more shots from that trip, but they're not showing up at the moment, so I'm not sure what happened there. But that's okay.
That's really
We've
unique. I've never seen anything like that, Lucky.
yeah, that's right. I took a few close-ups as well. I mean, I probably can just switch over to that particular that shoot if I can find it here and show a few more shots. What are we? There was a probably don't need to see close-ups of dead animals like that, but yeah, that there was a pretty amazing morning. You can see here too. The main reason I was going up there was for the wildflowers, and
Yeah.
so got some really nice shots of the wildflowers along some of those alpine pools, which is a really nice yeah, way of doing it. If anyone's got any questions too, by the way, as I'm talking, like how to do it or other, what's involved or whatever, you're welcome to ask in the YouTube chat there too. We are keeping an eye on it, so that definitely means that we can answer your queries and get back to you. The day that I really enjoyed, which wasn't showing up for some reason, was on this morning, and so I liked trying to fit this peak in sort of it's sort of like it's a jigsaw puzzle and it's sort of fitting beautifully in that particular um, that sort of gap there. What else do we have here? Just some cushion plants and different things like that. Yeah, might and then there was a really awesome sunset up on the temple. Uh, got I decided to hike quite fast and get up so some of these will turn out quite nicely once I give them the proper treatment.
Yeah,
Beautiful
nice.
wildflowers there looking out over the over King David's Peak there, and also the amazing dolerite patterns and how the light sort of spills off the dolerite. The sort of light was all happening in the wrong direction though, which was kind of frustrating. So for that sunset, so that didn't really help too much, but that's okay. Righto. Then after that, I decided well, I went on a trip with my family to um, uh, into Ocean Grove, and so at my in-laws they have a like a bird feeder, and so it was really fun to be able to just shoot through the window and pick up a few cheeky shots here. Obviously lavender's not the most natural background, but really nice sort
Oh,
of
cool.
golden color background. So yeah, it's really fun to play with those bird and animal portraits there. And did a few cheeky shoots around the Bellarine. This is what is it? Port Lonsdale Lighthouse and the jetty there as well, which is really beautiful feature to photograph there. Didn't really, I mean, wasn't really there for photos, but it was nice to get out on a few different shoots and get out there. So unlike Paul, I don't have a lot to share from my time interstate. I must admit, whilst it's amazing to catch up with family, I tend to find that I'm just looking so much at what's happening back at home and where the wildflowers are all at. And that's sort of more front of mind sometimes, and so I'm generally quite keen to get back. And so even actually on the drive home, coming off the Spirit of Tasmania, we went via Pine Lake, and I photographed some of the scoparia off the side of the road there. But I only really had a very quick amount of time to shoot. I was pretty keen to get home after all of the travel that we'd done. So it was a bit of a taster for some of the shooting that was to come. But we had a really great year for wildflowers in Tasmania, and so it was really nice to be able to see the scoparia up here. And what that really did too was consolidate for me that I actually wanted to go back to the walls of Jerusalem. And the main reason was that when I did the first trip to the walls of Jerusalem, the scoparia wasn't quite, well, this is scoparia, which is scoparia flower. It wasn't quite developed as much as I would have liked. And so I decided to go back just so that I could make the most of the season. And so what actually happened was I got really I left really late hiking up there. This is actually on the 30. Well, this is the morning of the 31st, but I actually hiked up there on the 30th of December, and I was going to have New Year's up in the walls of Jerusalem, and I didn't take any photos on the way up because I left almost in the dark from the car park and only set up the tent at about 10 p.m. So I sort of, it was nice to prove to myself that I can, do hard things again. So that was quite nice. But it was really hard getting out of the bed early in the morning to shoot. But I managed to get some nice light and
Oh,
really beautiful shots of the scoparia with well, in my opinion, of the Scoparia and King David's Peak behind. These are all unstacked focus stacks, so they have the full range to them. It's just I've got to really sort through exactly which compositions I like. Probably crop this and not have these distracting flowers in the corner, for example. If I chose to present some of these at all. I found some really interesting angles and got
look
some
at
really,
that.
really nice light all over the place. And went back to my path again and got a bit more of a selfie type shot this time. But yeah, just a really interesting, unusual sort of places to explore. There's a dead pencil pine stag, so that's what happens when the fire hits them. They don't recover, and so you have these areas, and there'll be some shots coming up, just sort of showing what that can look like when the fire hits a pencil pine forest. This is a pencil pine forest that's very much alive, and this is what it looks like in infrared. And one thing that's really amazing about the Walls of
That's
Jerusalem area is
crazy,
how
Luke.
it's just one big giant
Amazing.
sponge, and you get the amount of water that's there is just astounding because it's all running under you, and you could all drink it all, like it's all the most pure, beautiful water. And so yeah, this is basically that's actually water there, and sort of just all flowing almost just over the ground. There was that much water around the place. Not the
Oh,
most award-winning composition. This is some reeds sort of coming up through it in a pool. Might even bump the exposure a little bit on that. But yeah, so just like really love the painterly look of the reeds sort of coming up through an infrared. Yeah. And then it was nice to visit a really famous tree as well. This is Peter Dombrowskis's famous pencil pine that he's took on near the next to the Pool of Siloam. For those that are big fans of Peter Dombrowskis' work, you would have seen this shot. You'll see another shot coming up as well that I took here as well. It's always nice to honour other photographers and their beautiful compositions that they
oh
find,
no.
but it's also nice to take your own shots and you'll see how I've also taken my own shots in this location and not tried to emulate someone else's image, but it's definitely nice to also do these well-known shots in a different way as well and help people interpret and understand it differently as well. Here's a more sort of shows of what the Scaparia was like, and was really it still probably had a little bit to go in a way, which I was quite surprised about. But you can see these beautiful cushion plants and the reflecting upland glow of this mountain in the water. You can see I was again very lucky with the weather, which is always a nice thing to have.
Oh,
It's looking
nice.
towards King David's Peak and then also across to the small Solomon's Throne in the distance there. Um, and then yeah, just I guess you could it's like infinite shots, like, as Paul was saying too. You can kind of just point it in any direction and get a pretty cool shot. And on this particular day, I walked around for hours, really all over the place, taking thousands of shots. So it was very hard to just choose one or two. So I haven't really chosen too many more uh, wildflower-based shots, so you'll have to wait and watch on my social media to see some of those. These certainly aren't necessarily even my favorite or best ones, but it is surprisingly challenging to find a pattern in the composition that actually works with these
Yeah.
flowers.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the main challenges. Is often the ones that look really good are the ones that are all tatty or pasted, or so finding the actual subjects can be a big part of the challenge. And if you've only just woken up and gotten out of bed and you out of the sleeping bag and you're trying to work out, you're running down somewhere to try and work it out in the early morning, it can be a bit of a challenge. So it was really interesting to be able to test myself that way. Then what happened was, after doing a huge big hike during the day, I went back into the to my tent and sort of I was checking for aurora because there was potentially an aurora on the first night, and unfortunately, not much happened that night. And then on the second night, we actually did get an aurora, and I was able to. I missed the first part of it because when you're up there, it's not like you got mobile reception giving you an aurora alert every 5 seconds or anything. And so, but I knew straight away that I had to move, and so I covered several kilometers in a very short period of time to get to this particular location. I didn't actually have this shot in mind or photograph this particular pencil pine, but like originally, but I had actually photographed this pencil pine before. I've photographed this in the winter where it was actually isolated and the pool behind was frozen. And I just really liked the tree. It's just sort of a really it's a baby pencil pine, and it's kind of just it's very obvious when you go past it that it's just sitting there waiting to be photographed. So these are the first sort of attempts that I had it. I was just using my head torch to light it. And again, these aren't finished edits, so I'll shape the light a little bit more in my post-processing and things like that. I've just done some basic edits just to show what's possible. But basically, you can sort of see almost like an evolution of how I was approaching it. I was trying to get a little bit more separation of this tree and the background, and certainly by using the lighting, you can kind of get that separation, which was really handy. This one shows a different lighting again. and much prefer this lighting in a way. Just have to try and balance it. And then this one here is probably going to be the kind of the candidate that I do more of the work on, and that's mainly because you've also got this beautiful purple beam. I think it was like was it um was it something purple pencil pines with uh, a pencil pine with a pillar of purple aurora or something. Try to find how many P's I can put in the title for it.
It's a lot of pieces.
But yeah, so that's and then this one here as well is pretty cool for vertical. So you can sort of maybe see how I could work more on these. These are I don't know if I can show the. Oops, that's not the right key for the job. Um, but um, I was just going to try and show the I think if I go into develop, maybe I can do a before and after just to show you what the it's only showing it on the top screen, not the bottom screen. That's okay. It hasn't actually changed too much versus the original. And so that's what you can also do is if the light is a bit bright in this bit, you can bring some of the darker bits into this one. It was also a bit windy as well, so I had to choose a shutter speed that enabled the pencil pine to kind of work. So but yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one just because unfortunately what happened was the clouds came in and I didn't get the beautiful show that everyone else got. Pretty much everywhere else in the state, the aurora just kept going all night, and I had wall-to-wall cloud. And basically, this is what it looked like for me, which is bit unfortunate. And then actually, you're probably not going to see too many shots like this one. But yeah, that's looking north. So and this was at
Oh, wow.
quite this was at 11 p.m. So it's not the afterglow. Well, it could be partly twilight as well, I suppose, but it's all aurora glow because it was such a big aurora, and yeah, I wasn't able to see it all because the cloud just came in so thick. So that was a little bit disappointing, but you know that's life, and that's how it goes. I did make up for it later, and as you'll see, that's sort of another view of what the aurora I had to go with was. It was more early in the morning, just before my sunrise shoot, so it was a bit disappointing to not have the clear skies everyone else had. But yeah, if I can pull this shot together and be able to release that, I'd be pretty happy. So yeah, it's not often someone probably shows their shots before they've really baked them. So do hopefully appreciate. I think someone told me once the difference between a professional and amateur photographer is you know the pro only shows you the finished photos. So maybe I'm not that professional. I don't know, but I hope you appreciate anyway. I mean this particular mountain is just astounding, and you can just keep photographing it all morning in different ways. So and it's pretty much what I did. So I'll have to pick a favorite out of some of these. I really love the silhouette here that you
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
get with the mountain behind and some of the scaparia in the foreground. And again, these are all focus. This isn't a focus stacked shot, but I do have all the frames to stack them, so I have to get busy and do that at some point. And I really love this little creek and how you can sort of place the mountain peak in these sort of shapes. It's always a bit of a getting these compositions can be a kind of a jigsaw puzzle in a way, as I said earlier. And that's, I guess, the game of composition is, if you think of it that way. Beautiful, amazing cushion plants
Yeah,
surrounded by these
perfect.
fantastic coral ferns. Really love this one too. And this was probably later in the morning, 8 in the morning. So, you know, you don't necessarily, it's quite well after sunrise, but because the light is still quite you know, dappled with the cloud around, you can still get some really nice shots because the light's not too harsh. And I know Peter Dombrovskis took a lot of his shots in the early morning light as well. It doesn't if the conditions are there and the shots are there, then keep going. And then this is my favorite pencil pine in the whole park. I got to visit it again, and basically I was actually this branch here is actually the behind, but it's the trunk behind me, so it's actually I'm looking straight up essentially, and you can actually stand in this tree and it sort of surrounds you like you're in a little jail or something. But it's quite a almost like an intimate experience actually to be with a tree like that. And it's such an old tree. It's a no, it's hard to explain, but hopefully one day you guys will be able to see these sort of trees and up close and personal and sort of understand they almost have their own little sort of beings in some ways. And then what I decided to do after being up there, this was taken at 8:19 in the morning, and then this was taken on the same day at 6:40 p.m. So basically, I walked out of Walls of Jerusalem and into Cradle, and on the same
Wow.
day, and it was an amazing day of weather. And the reason I did that was that I'd already felt like I'd got most of what I wanted from Walls, and there was some shots. I really wanted to visit the Scaparia on Cradle Cirque at Cradle Mountain, and so I decided to hike up into Cradle. So it was a very big day. I think it was about a 20-kilometer day of hiking, and I was on a bit of a mission because I had to make it out to Barn Bluff, which is over here, for sunset. And so this was taken at 6:40 or whatever, and sunset was at 8:40. So I had a lot of hiking to do to make it in time. And it was just one of those bluebird days where you just were happy to be there. And even though I'd walked all the way out of Walls and had to hike up Marion's Lookout and change over and do all of that, my legs felt really good and I was in really good spirits. And I was richly rewarded with some really beautiful light, and it was really nice when all the effort that you put in actually pays off, and you're able to get to a spot and sort of get shots that you sort of have pre-visualized. That's the sort of dirtier version of this one with all of the spots, so you can see there's a bit of work required when you're shooting into the sun. And I did do the trick where you can put your finger over the lens to sort of stop the sun from creating these artifacts. It's a lot cleaner once the sun gets really close to the horizon. You can see there's really only this one artifact here. But it's a stunningly beautiful little area up there. And Barn Bluff for me is a really special mountain because it's basically when I first did the overland track and one of probably my first big wilderness experience in Tasmania. You see Barn Bluff on basically the first day of the overland track, and I had this just the most incredible shoot at sunset. And there was this may have seen the shot of mine. It's got an orange cloud over the top of Barn Bluff, and so
Yeah.
for me, being able to get back out there was really meaningful for me because it's a special place when you can revisit places where you've had a moment that sort of maybe helped to make you realize, yes, I want to be a landscape photographer. And really, I probably would credit that moment as me going, I just need to keep doing this. So unfortunately, though, I was incredibly tired because I'd barely not slept after the aurora the night before. So I was pretty annoyed when the aurora came back out, and we're able to really get some pretty amazing shots out there. And the aurora did go all night that night, and it was clear all night, and so kind of annoyingly so in a way. And but it was just like a absolute phenomenal experience. And this is one I'm really proud of because it's actually a picket fence above Barn Bluff with the
Yeah.
beams and the track. And so this is basically a rehash of my shot, the track to Barn Bluff, but now with the Aurora. So it's really nice to be able to do a new version and take of it, and kind of maybe show a transition of my work over time where I, am now doing a lot more night photography. And you can even see this has actually got a time lapse of this as well, but you can see the picket fence sort of moving across like that. And then Steve came out, which is pretty good. Steve, if you haven't heard of Steve before, that's him there. Um, I don't know I can't remember the acronym for Steve, but yeah, there's a pretty cool like sort of the beams on this side and then Steve on that side, and then the track leading that way. So plenty of shots to go through still. You can even see a little pool of water there reflecting the aurora colors. So yeah, so these will be fun to sort of get through and work on. And then this is part of a time lapse sequence that I shot. You can see very clearly see the curtains in the aurora there with these amazing sort of vivid beams coming up. So you can imagine that is part of a time lapse sequence. So that's going to be a fun one to put together in 2027 or when I get to it, unfortunately. Then managed. I didn't really get that much sleep, but was able to then photograph some shots at sunrise, which is probably the key thing because it's quite hard to shoot Scarparia backlit. And I've actually shot it back. I've got shots I'm so happy with already from this a sunset that I was more keen on shooting a sunrise anyway. And so tried a few different angles and perspectives there, and I've got hundreds more to go through as well. Even though it was flowering really well, it still was quite challenging to find a composition that worked meaningfully. But I feel like I've got quite a few up my sleeve there, but definitely gives you an idea of what I was trying for there. And also Peter Dombrovskis has in his collection very similar images too with Scarparia Barn Bluff in the back, and it's certainly been an inspiration for me to explore out that way. If you're ever doing the overland track, you'll definitely see this area, and if you do it in sort of late December, early January, hopefully you'll get this beautiful Scarparia native wildflower show out there, and it's really worth checking out because it's quite pretty. I was fortunate because I got to stay a bit longer and spend some time with it because normally just sort of powering past on the way to Waterfall Valley Hut. So that's and then I did a few little infrareds of the mountains in the overland track. That's actually Mount Ossa there, and then that's Mount Oakley, and then Mount Pelion East there as well, and a few of the other mountains, which is pretty cool. Maybe that's not. I think that's Pelion East. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's Barn Bluff looking back towards from where I came. So like on the way walk back out, and that's sort of what the color version looks like. So you can sort of see
Oh,
how all of the vegetation kind of goes white there. Some of the Pandani on the walk back, and then a shot similar to the establishing shot, but with the in an infrared with Cradle Mountain, just something different. I stayed for sunset there and actually stayed there overnight because I was waiting to see if there was going to be any aurora, but it wasn't all that lucky with the aurora, unfortunately. So I stayed up, but then I decided to actually leave the park. But I shot these at sunset and got some really nice. What I actually did with this is actually handheld at 1/25th of a sec, actually a bit faster than I thought. And basically trying to get this subject separation here. So with a wide angle, hand holding it really high up and then being able to get that separation and just take a really maybe potentially slightly different angle on what's been done before. You get to do that stuff if you're waiting around for a while, which is pretty nice. And then on the way home, on the way back,
mm.
I stopped off in Sheffield, and it just happened to have a really beautiful sunset, which I haven't edited yet, as you can see. But yeah, some really lovely light there over Mount Roland. So I'll have to try and find a favorite shot there out of all of those as well. But I keep going so we don't go too over time. Um, and then so we'll just last part now is just talking about Frenchman's Cap, and I don't have a huge number of shots from Frenchman's, and I do apologize for that. But I over that Frenchman's trip, I took probably about 3 or 4 thousand shots, so it's not as many as some of the other trips. And This trip was interesting because this is actually the first shot I took, and so this is actually well and truly into the hike. It's actually in a place called uh, uh, just Lake Vera, which is
Yeah.
on the second day of the hike. And so the first day I was just powering in, and it was a very hot day, and I was just keen to get up there. And you could say it wasn't a very photogenic day, but as soon as I got into this forest, it just stopped me in my tracks. And I realized that this is actually some really special rainforest, and decided that on this trip I wasn't going to just power ahead and try and get somewhere. Like if I found something that I really enjoyed, I was just going to stop and shoot it and just document the experience, I suppose. And
Oh,
the track itself is like you're just walking through like a fairy tale, really.
oh,
Yeah, and then there's this most incredibly beautiful waterfall further along the track as well. And so I probably spent about an hour photographing this waterfall just to try different angles, different compositions. and I had the time to do it, so I thought, why not, and just try different things. And I quite liked this wider
Oh,
shot with this rock shelf, sort of with the Tannin water in the foreground and the beautiful trees and everything around. So I was using a 20 to 70 mil lens quite a lot, which fit a polarizer over it. Whereas I didn't actually have a polarizer for my larger lens, which is my 12 to 24, because it's such a giant polarizer on such a wide angle lens. So I shot a lot more with the 20 to 70 because I had the polarizer on that, and I really love the lens. It's a really great focal length to walk around with, and I'm surprised at how much I actually used it. I wouldn't be surprised if more than 50% of the shots I took were actually with the 20 to 70 rather than with the 24-105. So that's yeah, it's 20 mil, so that would be with the 20 to 70 as well. So it's just nice to get those really quick grabs, quick shots as you go. This is what I ended up finding that my favorite feature in the walk, which is Charlin's Peak. Some people call it Nicole's Needle, but I believe that's further around the corner. But and I found these beautiful little snow daisies around that area as well. So this is actually Frenchman's Cap in the back here. And just played around with doing a few focus stacks and things. So we'll have to do some more editing on. But for me, it feels like you're like in Yosemite, or like a
yeah, yeah,
really like nowhere else you could really describe as being Tasmania. And so I realized that black and white was going to start to be my friend, and so I did take quite a lot of black and white shots subsequent to that as well. This is we got down to Tahoon Hut, which is basically the end of the hike before you do the walk up onto Frenchman's. I didn't actually summit Frenchman's, which raised a lot of eyebrows, and I was fully capable of doing it, but I didn't need to go up there to prove anything, and I was actually more keen on just relaxing, resting, and then actually spend a lot more time photographing the Charlin's Peak area on the way back, which I really enjoyed. This is Lake Tahoon as well. There's definitely a lot of shots and possibilities down at Lake Tahoon, but for me, I was captivated by other areas, and I think it's really important to follow your nose and not photograph what you might expect to be what you want to photograph, but photograph the areas that actually speak to you, I suppose. And another spot that did was this sort of rock ridge that had all of these dead pencil pines all over it. And there's going to be a lot of editing, but there's going to be some really cool like black and white shots coming out of that because of the stark contrast of the pencil pine stags against the actual the foliage there as well. And this is sort of a color version of this shot, and then you can sort of see the black and white treatment and the difference. I don't know. They're both kind of quite a bit of impact, but yeah, they have very different feels to them. That's probably a slightly different light too. You can see the light is slightly shadowed on the top of the mountain here versus this frame. So it's all of those subtle selections that you have to make when you're looking at these later on. But yeah, the lot of drama and mood. So rather than shooting with my infrared camera that I'd lugged all the way up there, a lot of this day I was actually shooting with my A7R, but in black and white mode, or black and white profile, because what would happen is in infrared you would actually get all of this vegetation being white too. So you'd get the white tree trunks, but everything else is white. So you're not having a contrast anymore. So it's nice to understand or recognize when infrared's a good idea and when it's a good idea to do just straight up standard black and whites, I suppose. This one was super cool. I was absolutely just fully engaged in the process, and then this heart just comes
wow,
over in the
yeah,
clouds, and I was like, oh yeah, that sort of sums it up for me. I was just sort of blissing out, just shooting this area, and found a few little snow daisies as well, with the peak behind, which I've focus stacked as well. And yeah, just again, these sort of scenes to me are scenes that you wouldn't automatically consider to be Tasmanian, because you don't normally see these
mm,
big sort of pencil pines just growing up so tall on their own like that, just naturally occurring that way. And the other thing I really love about it is that these are all baby little pencil pines. Sorry, I'm saying pencils. They're King Billy pines. I'm sorry about that. They're all little baby King Billy pines through here. So this whole area is just going to be the most incredible King Billy forest in the future if the fire happens to stay away. Um, yeah, just some of the stunning light that comes through. It's probably not a bad mono as well. Probably
Oh,
better
beautiful.
mono than color. Um, and that's a whistle stop tour through 4 days on Frenchman's Cap track. So still got plenty to go through and unpack and plenty of other shots that I probably should have showed but didn't get to. And then the final shoot, I'm gonna there's a couple extra ones, but this is a when Paul was on Maria Island, I actually did a hike to Crescent Bay, and this is the comet here coming down, and this is Mount Brown in the distance.
It's just
And
going
so,
up black on my screen, Lucky.
oh, okay, yeah, thanks for letting me know. I think it's because the second screen stopped uh the secondary display decided to turn off. There
There
we
you
go.
go.
Yeah, you saw this one though, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the comet coming through, and so I was sort of hoping they would have a bit more aurora with the comet, but didn't quite flare up. Well, actually, I thought that might be the aurora I got. Actually, I was like, well, I guess I can take it. I got the comet, I got the mountain, and then that happened, and so the aurora actually did show really nicely, and I feel like it was the perfect amount of aurora. Actually, it was something
Wow.
that's really nicely contained within the image and almost like kind of sits in there just as if it's the right place for it to be. There's some darker versions that still need to process, but gives you a bit of an idea of what I have to work with from that particular shoot. So, and they're all from time lapse sequences as well. So that's going to be pretty amazing to put together as a time
What
lapse.
time did you get the best
This was at
separation in the features?
12:45.
45, yeah.
That's 12:43. That's 11:46. I remember that I was thinking about leaving at midnight and driving home, but then it kept on flaring up all the time,
Yeah,
which was
just
really
kept going.
annoying.
And I was up
Yeah,
till 5:15 or something.
yeah, I was very tired the next day, that's for sure. And then I put the long lens on and got some shots of the aurora behind Cape Raoul because the walk to Crescent Bay is near Mongon Bay, which is where the we have a really great view of Cape Raoul, and so we had actually quite a bit of bio in the water, and also some quite a nice show at Mongon Bay as well of the aurora, which was pretty cool. It is a really good aurora spot, Mongon Bay, because you don't have to really walk anywhere. You just go to the lookout,
Me
and
too, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's right there. So it was pretty nice. And that's Cape Raoul. So that shot that I showed earlier, that's Cape
Perfect.
Raoul all the way back in there. So it shows you how punched in I was. And then I thought I was like, oh, why am I staying? Well, I was sort of at Cape Raoul and falling asleep standing up and stuff. And I was like, oh no, I need to get to tessellated pavement because that's going to be good. But by the time I got there, the twilight had already started, and there
Yeah.
was actually a really really good sunrise at tessellated pavement. But I just couldn't shoot it. I was just so tired that just wasn't going to happen, which is a bit disappointing. You could sort of see it brewing here. There's a bit of Milky Way there. But on the workshop that I'm running in Tasman Peninsula, we'll be much better rested and be able to get down and photograph the Milky Way. Hopefully, a similar shot to this at a much more civilized time of probably 8 p.m. or something like that. So, yeah, keep an eye out on that workshop if you want to join me on Tasman Peninsula for some astro landscapes and a potential aurora. Who knows? That's a couple shots from home now to round it off. I'm very lucky to have a beautiful rock shelf right in front of where I live, and just
Really.
had a really nice sunset the other evening. It was only on the 3rd of Feb, and yeah, just really enjoy exploring around home, seeing what I can find, and I think that's something that Paul does really well. Is going out and just taking your camera. Like if I'm going to go for a walk on the beach, I'll just take the camera. You might do it all the time, or it's nice just to have it there and still keep practicing your craft and being engaged with the craft of taking photos. So that's definitely a really great thing to do.
I
And
had when I saw you the other day, oh, you finished Lucky first, yeah. I thought you.
I oh no, that's all right. Yeah.
I was just saying, I caught up with with Luke and a very dear friend of ours, Dexter Dykester, when he was down here just a couple of days ago, and I had a camera gear with me from coming back from Maydena from the bike park, and it ended up not only shooting some of the wooden boat festival, ended up shooting these like fighter jet that came out of nowhere and flew over the
Oh
sky
yeah,
on all these trails, and then I ended up shooting all these really interesting low light, long exposures at a
yeah,
carnival up on the head on the way back to the car, and then ended up shooting the fireworks, which I didn't even know was on. It was,
super fun.
oh, you got them too? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, yeah, the roulettes. Yeah,
It
the
was
we
just,
had some really cool flyovers, and I
great,
just got a 200 to 600 mil lens, and so I was able to
perfect.
perfect shoot to sort of test it out, and
Oh, you missed the
yeah,
walk it back
I
to the
should have
car
shot at
then.
a faster shutter speed. If you go closer up to some of these, they're a little bit soft, but it's good practice, and it's definitely something a bit different to what you would normally shoot. And that's precisely why it's a good idea to try and capture this stuff because it keeps you on your toes, keeps you developing as a photographer. Who knows what you can end up doing with this sort of stuff. So yeah, so I really enjoy it, and that's why we also decided to not just make it about landscapes tonight as well, and share
Yeah,
some
I,
of the
I,
other.
I didn't put those in because I was thinking I got so many that aren't traditional landscapes. I better
Yeah,
cut off. But my
yeah,
point
no,
is,
that's
what you were
it's
saying, like
actually
having
funny because
having a camera
we
with
were
you, it
we were
is gives you opportunities that may surprise you. It's usually worth just. I usually have one
absolutely.
stashed in the car at all times just in case, and in this case I had a full kit. But
And so, and then, yeah, and basically, I went when my friend Dex was visiting. Dex does all the graphics for our shows, so big shout out to Dex, and he
Ronnie
might even be
Dex,
watching. Who knows? But yeah, he's a really dear friend of ours, and he just those roulettes started flying overhead just as we were leaving town. So it's like the perfect kind of bon voyage sort of moment.
yeah, wasn't it? Yeah,
And then this is Dex and I did the Cape Hoy walk, which is a really amazing day walk that you can do. There's this Melaleuca
especially
or
if you like
tea tree here
steps.
just on the edge here flowering away, and so I got a few different shots. Wasn't really a walk to take photos, just a walk to stretch the legs, and I did suss out a few comps for Astro or something else down the track, but it was definitely nice to get out there, and body's feeling pretty good and fit, so it was nice to do that, and you probably could still use some of the shots I got as well out that way. There was a it's pretty spectacular coastline out there, and we had a pretty reasonable evening or afternoon, all things considered. So yeah, so if you haven't been out to Cape Hoy or you're around Hobart and want to do a nice day hike, can't really recommend Cape Hoy enough. It's access that off of Fortescue Bay, and it's about a sort of a 4 hour return hike or so. Quite a lot of
There's
steps,
the
but
famous totem
you're
pole
richly
down there.
rewarded. Was that sorry?
There's a famous totem pole down there. One of
That's
the most
right,
famous
yeah. And there was
ones in
actually some
Australia.
kayakers going through. I was wondering if Toby was out or not at the time, but yeah, some kayakers actually went through that gap there. This is looking straight down from the lookout. And that totem pole there is yeah, it's a nice sharp lens, this one. Yeah, that's a pretty impressive hunk of oh, it's not showing up on the second screen, is it? That's annoying. It's a pretty impressive hunk of dolerite in that one. So fantastic. All right. Well, I'll stop sharing, and that's enough from me. Thanks for letting us t take you through our summer adventures. Hopefully, you've learned a few things about what we get up to, and there's always a few little tips in there and insights into how we approach things. So I hope you found that useful, and our little segment at the start as well. We're keen to keep that going. So if you do have any suggestions yourself of any tools that you'd like me to feature or if you've got anything that you'd like Paul to check out for his critique, I know that he'd be pretty keen to hear about it. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning, Paul, is that you're actually doing critique sessions yourself. So it's not just a matter of you being able to talk about it on the screen, but both you and I are operating, mentoring and critiquing sessions. So you're very welcome to get in touch with us. And did you want to say anything about that, Paul?
Oh yeah, I work with people all around the world actually. It's a wonderful way to broaden the scope of what I get to see visually as well, actually. Some of them have been clients and workshops that have followed through on different things because Luke and I often do um, offer some critiquing sessions post workshop, just to give sense of follow through and like, well, we've got all these images. What do we do now? So they don't just sort of disappear into the world of hard drives. And you start developing that extra skill set. Like a lot of people see some of my really high-end photographer friends see the capture of the photograph as just the raw material, and the creative process happens after. Luke and I are a little bit more orientated to the former, but it's definitely a very big realm. The curation of work, the selection of images, the final cropping, the compositional elements, and then how can you shape the images using the resources on and the skill sets you have on hand to really strengthen their message and their power and
Mm. That's why
presence.
it's really challenging to share stuff like I have tonight, where it's not, fully shaped and everything, but at the same time, it's also you're sort of seeing how I saw it when I was there too. So it's also probably, well, I like to think my edits are doing the same thing, of course, but yeah, just enhancing or actually, it's probably true that the shots don't exactly show what it was like when you were there when you think about it, because the raw is just flattening it and merging it all. So that's a big part of the work that we're doing in post processing to really bring those shots to life, back to life again.
Well, I
So
also find it really insightful in terms of the real life process. Like this that's rare. I think we get an insight like you just gave, Lucky, to how committed and how little sleep and how much physicality is involved and how much technicality with the focus stacking and exposure blending that of the shots you're taking. There's a lot going on there that we often don't have any clue about when you just see the finished image. So I actually think it's a really quite a precious insight, Luke, and I actually really appreciate it.
oh, that's great. Well, I'm glad that my disorganization and horrible ability to keep on top of editing has been beneficial for everybody.
You're
So
you're, you're
I'm
passionate and
glad my
open
pain has
openness.
helped. So that's great. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us tonight and sticking around. We will be back in 2 weeks for another live show, or at least that's the plan. So we're pretty excited about that. So we're back on a normal schedule now, and we're all very committed to keeping this show going because we love doing what we do, and but we always get so much out of it, even if it's forcing me to get some edits done, which is nice. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. Well, any more messages, Paulie, and we'll sign off.
That'll do for me. Time for some dinner and prepare for
Mm.
another strangely hot day in Tasmania.
I
30 degrees
know. Well,
tomorrow.
hopefully, no more lightning. That'd be nice. So, all right.
Yeah. All right.
Take care,
Keep well,
guys,
everyone.
and we'll see you next time. Good evening, and until next time, keep those